the battlefield was littered with broken weapons and shattered armor. In the midst of it, Cyan knelt, weary from the clash that had dragged on endlessly. His father's words echoed in his mind, a mantra that had guided him all his life. Live for the clan. He had always understood it to mean that his desires were meaningless. His duty was to remain by his brother's side, a shadow bound to serve. A knight stepped forward, smirking at the sight before him. He mocked Cyan for fighting against some of the continent's strongest commanders on his own. With scorn, he remarked that such resolve was expected of the brother of that man. The knight revealed himself as Boris, and when he addressed Cyan by his name, Cyan's glare darkened. He silently cursed Boris, who seemed to revel in his misfortune. Boris accused Cyan of bearing a power tainted with a sickening black mist. He claimed it was just as the rumors had said and branded Cyan as an assassin from Mist, an organization that opposed the Knights of Light. With self-righteous zeal, Boris promised to report that he had destroyed an impure being tied to the heathens. Cyan's grip tightened around his dagger as he retorted with icy defiance. He dared Boris to try, warning that he would not have any teeth left to speak once their fight ended. Yet Boris revealed his confidence, pointing out the 9-star magic barrier surrounding the area. The barrier was meant to prevent Cyan from unleashing his hidden power. Inwardly, Cyan recognized the danger. He needed to survive and uncover the true culprit behind this plot alongside his brother. Declaring that a barrier meant nothing to him, he prepared to break free, but a voice interrupted. It was Ekel, dressed in golden armor. His older brother's presence froze Cyan in place. His father's words returned once more, whispering that Ekel embodied the clan itself, and that Ekel's success was Cyan's success. However, the sight of Ekel made Cyan realize the horrifying truth. His brother had orchestrated everything. Ekel approached, remarking on Cyan's confusion. Cyan demanded an explanation, asking why his brother had betrayed him. Ekel praised Cyan for his years of service, claiming he had carried burdens for the clan and for him personally. Yet Ekel's words quickly soured. He accused Cyan of being tainted, of being nothing more than a murderer wrapped in an ominous mist. He declared that such a creature could not even be called human. The accusation left Cyan shaken. His brother, the man he had served faithfully for decades, now denounced him before everyone. Ekel's fury rose as he shouted that Cyan had fooled them long enough and demanded whether he even understood his own sins. Cyan clenched his fists, questioning inwardly. Murderer, my sins? The accusations pierced him like knives. His rage burst forth as he shouted in defiance. He reminded Ekel of all he had endured, the succession struggles within the empire, the battles against the Demon King's army, the war to unify the continent. He had fought for all of it, sacrificing everything because serving his brother had been his life's purpose. Slamming his fist into the ground, he roared that he had worked like a dog for 20 years, yet now Ekel sought to discard him. His fury manifested in a surge of dark magical energy. The aura rippled outward, terrifying the soldiers around him. One of them gasped in disbelief, claiming that no human should possess such mana. Cyan sneered at their fear, denouncing Ekel as a cowardly hero seeking to kill his younger brother. Summoning the last of his strength, Cyan swore that even one strike would be enough if it crippled Ekel. He slipped behind his brother with precision and aimed at his weak point. Yet before his blade could pierce, a shield materialized, protecting Ekel. Boris had intervened. Ekel countered immediately, thrusting his holy sword with ruthless intent. He declared that he had hoped to give Cyan a painless death out of brotherly pity, but now the truth was revealed. To him, Cyan was a demon, something he had never trusted from the beginning. With those words, Ekel struck without hesitation. His sword tore into Cyan's body, and he turned away, leaving him to die. Cyan collapsed onto the frozen ground, blood soaking through his clothes. Despair washed over him as he cursed his life, lamenting that everything had been wasted. His eyes dimmed, yet his body moved of its own accord, surging forward with one final burst of rage. His blank eyes glowed as he screamed for his brother's death, charging recklessly. However, Ekel's holy sword met him once more, unleashing a devastating energy that engulfed him. As he slipped into the abyss, a voice called out. Someone urged him to wake, addressing him as young master. Cyan's eyes opened suddenly, drenched in sweat. A maid stood before him, irritated by his sluggishness. Her name was Emily, and her presence left him stunned. It had been nearly 20 years since he had last seen her, yet she looked exactly as he remembered. Emily scolded him for oversleeping, insisting he prepare for training. Cyan, still disoriented, realized that his surroundings were familiar. The room was arranged precisely as it had been when he was young. Covering his face, he questioned whether he had returned to his childhood. Emily urged him on, accusing him of stalling to avoid his training session. Confused, Cyan asked what training she spoke of. Gradually, clarity returned to him. This was not a dream nor a vision before death. He had been thrown back into the past, to the duchy, decades earlier. The memory struck him. It was Foundation year 985, March 1st, a year before he would enter the academy. The day marked the annual duel arranged by his father, the Duke. His opponent was Kranz, his half-brother, favored as the legitimate son of Margaret Assayas, the Duke's wife. Despite being the youngest, Kranz received constant attention, while Cyan, the bastard son, was treated as a laughingstock. That duel had once sealed his fate, turning him into an outcast. This time, however, Cyan swore it would be different. Drawing his rapier, he felt the weight of his young body's limitations. Still, he knew this was real. Across from him, Kranz sneered, mocking his presence. The Duke signaled for the duel to begin. Kranz rushed recklessly, insulting him, but Cyan moved with calm precision. To him, Kranz's movements were painfully slow. With ease, he sidestepped and flicked his sword, disarming his brother. A swift kick sent Kranz crashing to the ground. The audience, including the Duke and Margaret, were stunned. Cyan raised his blade to his brother's throat, but memories of the past stirred. He recalled the years of bullying and humiliation. This time, he would not allow such threats to linger. He resolved to crush Kranz completely, to ensure that no one would ever mock him again. The duel ended decisively with Kranz's defeat. For the first time, the Duke summoned Cyan directly, clearing his schedule to speak with him. On his way, escorted by the knight Yurkin, Cyan crossed paths with Margaret. Her scornful eyes narrowed on him. Feigning courtesy, he inquired about Kranz's condition, but Margaret exploded with anger. She accused Cyan of audacity for even asking after beating his brother. Cyan dismissed her fury, reminding her that duels were fought to determine winners and losers. Enraged, she insulted him and his late mother, declaring that bastards like him did not deserve to be treated as legitimate children. Her venomous words made Cyan's blood run cold. For a moment, the thought of killing her flashed across his mind. Reason anchored Cyan's restless mind. He restrained his fury, convincing himself that there were far better ways to make the Duchess suffer. She would not be granted a swift punishment. Instead, he would take his time, slowly and carefully dragging her through torment. With composure, Cyan regarded her and spoke of the academy, reminding her that he would attend alongside Kranz. He suggested that if she truly cared for her son, she would want him to graduate with all his limbs intact. His words dripped with implication, and the Duchess immediately understood. Enraged, the Duchess raised her hand to strike him. Before it could fall, the knight by her side intervened, apologizing with urgency. He explained that the Duke had summoned Cyan, and there was no time to delay. Powerless against her husband's command, the Duchess stormed away in anger. Cyan, however, allowed a quiet smile to form within. The Duke's orders were absolute, and the knight who escorted him would not yield even to the Duke's wife. That level of protection was a comfort. When they arrived at the master's chamber, the knight knocked, and the Duke permitted them to enter. Cyan stepped forward, bowing with formal words as he greeted his father. It had been nearly 15 years since they had spoken privately. Duke Villiers Vert, master of the house, was known throughout the continent as the Guardian. He had stood against the demon invasions with unmatched magic and wisdom, preserving peace for as long as he lived. To the world, he was a hero. Yet in Cyan's memory, he was a man who spent his entire life in service to others, wasting his free will. To Cyan, that was not heroism but foolishness. The Duke regarded his son with a serious expression. He noted how Cyan's eyes had followed Kranz's sword with precision during the duel, allowing him to evade cleanly. He asked when Cyan had learned swordsmanship. Cyan, aware of his father's sharp perception, replied that he had taught himself in secret, practicing at night. His father expressed surprise, pointing out that Cyan had never shown interest in the blade. Pressing further, he asked why such talent had been hidden. Cyan explained that he had no wish to draw attention. The Duke did not let the matter rest. He questioned why Cyan had pressed so ruthlessly in the duel, especially after Kranz was already defeated. Cyan sensed the probing nature of the inquiry. Perhaps his father wanted to measure his true capability. Cyan answered that he had sought to prove himself, to demonstrate that he was superior to Kranz despite their shared blood. That was, in his eyes, the true purpose of the duel. His answer made the Duke laugh. He praised Cyan's clarity of thought, claiming that such level-headedness promised a bright future. The Duke even expressed delight that Cyan would grow into a reliable supporter for Ekil one day. At the mention of Ekil's name, Cyan froze. Memories of betrayal before his regression flooded him. Once again, everything revolved around Ekil. His father's obsession had not changed. The Duke then offered him a reward for his victory. Cyan concealed his thoughts behind a smirk. Within himself, he vowed to destroy everything Ekil would attempt to achieve. When asked what he desired, Cyan replied with subtle intent. Later, in his chambers, his maid Emily frantically confronted him. She repeated his request aloud, questioning his sanity for wanting to go to the battlefront. To her, the idea was madness. She described the battlefield as a land swarming with demonic beasts, a place where death lingered at every step. Cyan reflected quietly. Velia's, the western feud of the Wusif Empire, contained the most brutal frontline, the Limia Valley. Battles against demons had raged there for centuries. His father had opposed his request from the beginning but had finally given him one condition. Within 1 month, Cyan had to prove himself worthy. How that worth would be judged remained unclear, but Cyan accepted the challenge. He evaluated his circumstances. His young body was weaker than that of his peers, yet he retained the combat instincts and experience of his previous life. He also possessed a small reserve of magic. With rigorous training, he could push his body to its limits and reclaim much of his former power. Determination flared within him as he declared to himself that training would begin immediately. The door to his chamber burst open. Ellis entered, her expression dark with anger. She seized Cyan by the collar, shaking him in disbelief at his reckless decision. She accused him of letting victory over Kranz cloud his mind and demanded that he follow her. On the rooftop of the castle wall, Ellis stood across from him with a sword drawn. Her eyes blazed with resolve. She declared that if Cyan could endure her attacks for 3 minutes, she would allow him to pursue the battlefront. Otherwise, she would not permit it. Cyan questioned whether such extremes were necessary, but Ellis ignored his protest. She demanded an answer to one pressing question: was he after the family's title? He realized then why she was so intent on testing him. Her fear was that his sudden growth threatened her position in the legacy of the house. Cyan had no desire for titles or succession. Drawing his sword with fatigue still clinging to his limbs, he answered that he was not interested. Ellis did not relent. She forced him to fight, claiming that words were meaningless without proof. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him. The duel with Kranz still lingered in his muscles, and the day had been relentless. Yet Ellis gave him no chance to recover. Her blade came down with force, swift and unyielding. Cyan braced himself and met her strike, proving that he was not as weak as she believed. Ellis could hardly believe what had just happened. Her mind raced as she tried to comprehend how Cyan, only 10 years old, had managed to block her strike. The thought that she was going all out against her younger brother, who was 7 years her junior, unsettled her. After their weapons collided, they separated, both breathing heavily. Ellis tried to make sense of it. A rapier was supposed to be far too light to cleanly parry a long sword, yet Cyan had done so with precision. For a moment, she considered whether it had simply been luck. However, she quickly realized that Cyan's intuition was sharper than she had anticipated. This realization left her unsettled, and she muttered inwardly that she might already be in trouble. Determined to prove her superiority, Ellis launched a flurry of rapid and aggressive attacks. One of her strikes descended from above with force. Cyan moved instinctively, attempting to defend himself. At that instant, he twisted his blade, redirecting her attack to the side. Ellis was caught off guard by his quick thinking but pressed forward without hesitation. With a swift motion, she knocked his sword away and took a step back. Cyan mirrored her retreat, his expression tense as he reflected on how close the exchange had been. Had he not twisted his blade in time, the strike could have ended fatally. He reminded himself that the sword techniques of the mist style he used were primarily designed to kill. Controlling such techniques without causing lethal damage was extremely difficult, particularly given his lack of strength. He silently wondered how much time remained of the 3 minutes he had to maintain his mana enhancement. His weak body could only compensate for so long before reaching its limit. Frustrated, Ellis began to chant a spell, her voice filled with determination as she invoked elemental power to strengthen her blade. Earth and wind combined at her call, surging into her sword and surrounding it in a terrifying aura. Cyan's eyes widened with fear. The spell belonged to 6-star magic, and the sheer density of mana surrounding her weapon was overwhelming. He could not help but question if she was truly trying to kill him. The intensity in her gaze told him everything. Her pride refused to allow defeat, even at the hands of her much younger brother. Cyan grew more afraid, realizing that even if he blocked the attack, the force might throw him out of the castle. Yet despite his fear, he resolved to move forward, placing his trust in the desperate plan forming in his mind. Ellis's blade soared into the air, overflowing with power. Cyan prayed silently for Yurkin to intervene. Just before her attack could land, Yurkin, the knight of the family, appeared. With one hand he deflected Ellis's charged strike, and with the other he lifted Cyan to safety. The collision between Ellis's spell and Yurkin's sword erupted across the night sky, filling it with blinding light. Yurkin's expression remained stern as he addressed Ellis, warning her that her harshness toward her younger brother had gone too far. Cyan exhaled in relief, grateful for the intervention. He had been waiting for the knight's appearance. Ellis, realizing her mistake, embraced her brother and apologized with genuine remorse. She admitted that she had lost herself in her desire to prevent him from stepping onto the battlefield, a desire that had clouded her judgment. Cyan's expression softened as he considered her words. This was exactly like Ellis, always pushing herself too hard for the sake of others. She had always been recognized as one of the most gifted individuals in the Royal Academy, excelling in every subject, whether it was swordsmanship, magic, or academic study. Her beauty and unmatched talents had earned her the title of God's child. From an early age, she had trained rigorously with the sword and had been destined, alongside their elder brother Ekal, to become a guardian of the continent. Yet despite her brilliance, Cyan knew of her tragic fate from his past life. After joining the Knights of Light, Ellis had been killed far too soon. Remembering this, Cyan silently vowed that this time, he would protect her. Ellis turned to Yurkin, recalling that he was the Duke's guardian knight, though she pointed out that the Duke had already left for the battlefield. Yurkin explained that he was following the Duke's orders to secretly watch over Cyan. Cyan immediately recalled having sensed Yurkin's presence since leaving his father's office. He wondered if Yurkin would have continued to remain hidden had he not noticed him. At the same time, he questioned why his father had instructed such secrecy. Observing her brother's thoughts, Ellis smiled, amused that he still retained childlike qualities beneath his composure. The following day, Ellis departed once again for the academy, as she had only returned briefly to see their father before her graduation. Meanwhile, Cyan dedicated himself to his own growth, determined to push beyond the limits that had been restraining him. He tried repeatedly to break through, yet he found himself stuck at the same barrier despite 2 weeks of strength training. His progress had halted at a frustrating wall, and though he had once felt confident in his abilities, now he recognized that he needed a new solution. One afternoon, Emily entered carrying a package, announcing that it had arrived from Ellis. Cyan's eyes lit up with joy, but Emily grimaced at the strong odor emanating from it. She wrinkled her nose in disgust, asking what could possibly smell so foul. Cyan revealed that it was the blood of a hellhound, something he had specifically requested from Ellis. The rare substance could only be obtained in Lemia Valley or through the black market. Its stench and burning sensation upon consumption had led many to dismiss it as poisonous, yet Cyan knew the truth from his past life. The blood of such demonic beasts permanently increased both mana and strength, though most people considered that knowledge to be nothing more than rumor. Emily questioned him anxiously, asking if he truly intended to drink something so revolting. Cyan reassured her with a smile, teasing that he had already survived her cooking, which was far more dangerous. He recalled vividly the first time she had served him mushroom soup. A single bite had nearly stopped his heart, and compared to that memory, the blood was nothing. Without hesitation, he consumed it, enduring the harsh burn that spread through his body. Slamming the container down, he shouted with confidence that it was effective. Then he instructed Emily that he was going for a walk to test the results. As he entered the forest, Cyan reflected on the last 2 weeks he had spent waiting for this moment. Yurkin's constant presence had been suffocating, preventing him from moving freely. Only during the knight's absence for reports could Cyan truly act as he wished. The forest had always been a place of solitude for him, and he returned now with a clear purpose. He recalled how Ekal had once received a divine revelation from the god of light, Lumendel, stating that an ancient temple lay hidden within these mountains. Although Cyan had doubted its authenticity at first, he had later discovered an area where mana flowed unnaturally, confirming that there was indeed something extraordinary concealed there. Kneeling, Cyan pressed his hand against the ground and infused mana into it. The terrain began to collapse, revealing a hidden passage. Joy spread across his face as he laughed inwardly, certain that Ekal could never imagine what he was now uncovering. Below him stretched a staircase leading deep underground, illuminated faintly by a light at its end. Cyan's eyes narrowed with determination as he whispered to himself that the place he had sought was finally before him. Cyan stood at the entrance of the ancient temple with determination carved into his expression. He muttered to himself that this place felt different compared to the last time he had been there. His eyes roamed across the surroundings, drinking in the atmosphere of the ruin. Once, this had been a temple dedicated to Lumendel, the god of light, but all traces of that history had been erased after the god-demon war 3 centuries ago. It was remarkable to think that such a place could exist in the mountains so close to the castle. Cyan's gaze lingered on the cracked stones and fading murals, and in his mind, he could almost see the temple's master who once presided over this sacred ground. His thoughts shifted to the records of history. On August 12, in the year 999 before foundation, humanity had finally succeeded in repelling the Demon King's army from Valus. By all accounts, the demons had been far stronger than the humans. Yet humanity discovered the ancient relics known as the gods' weaponry, which granted them the strength to seize victory. Among these relics, the most renowned was the holy sword Duran Dark, blessed by Lumendel. It was said to have been the decisive factor in humanity's triumph against the demons. Cyan, however, knew the cruel twist of fate that awaited him. In the future, he would meet a pitiful death at the hands of that very sword once it came into the possession of Ekal. Perhaps there was some link between that sword and his regression, though he could not say for certain. Reaching out, Cyan touched the blade resting on the altar. No energy surged through him, no revelation or divine message stirred in his mind. He sighed and muttered that nothing had happened, his mood soured by the anticlimax. With irritation, he dismissed the so-called holy relic and decided to continue his real purpose. He told himself to finish his task and leave at once. As he stepped away from the light, a strange shadow caught his attention. At first, it seemed like it might belong to the sword, but that was impossible. Where light existed, darkness inevitably followed, and from that darkness a hidden pathway revealed itself behind the altar. Cyan approached it carefully, finding a staircase that descended into obscurity and ended at a wooden door weathered with age. He pushed it open and stepped inside. In the dim chamber beyond, his eyes immediately locked onto a blade glowing blood red. A faint smile touched his lips as he greeted the weapon. It was the demonic sword Kiram, the one he truly sought. Grasping the handle, Cyan's expression filled with joy while the immense magical energy emanating from the sword twisted the very air around him. He greeted Kiram and asked if it was still slumbering. The answer came quickly. A harsh, guttural voice resounded from the sword, mocking him as a fearless child who did not understand the cost of awakening it. The voice warned him that his body was already forfeit. As the darkness around him surged forward, Cyan met it with no fear. With a single hand he seized the approaching force, shocking it into retreat. The darkness condensed and transformed into the shape of a woman who struggled to escape his grasp. Cyan smiled with a wild glint in his eyes, remarking that she was far more reckless than before. The woman, stunned by his touch, demanded to know how he could resist her. He simply declared that the sword was his. She cursed at him and launched an attack with sharp claws, yet he dodged with ease. Landing a short distance away, she studied him with disbelief and asked who he truly was. She sensed an aura that belonged not to him, but to air. Cyan revealed that he was indeed the successor of air, declaring that her master had returned and that she should bow. Kiram, unwilling to accept such a claim, lashed out with a furious barrage of attacks. Her speed was formidable, and while fending her off, Cyan thought to himself that words alone would never convince her. He understood that a demonic sword's true intent was always to consume the body of its wielder. That left him little choice but to suppress her by force. He stepped back and smiled coldly before uttering the command, "Demonic sword control." Kiram's body convulsed as her movements were forcibly restrained, her form collapsing under his power. Cyan warned her that he would only ask once for her acceptance. Bound to the ground, she struggled in disbelief, unable to comprehend how he could wield such authority. His control pressed harder as he repeated his command again and again until her resistance broke. At last, Kiram relented, conceding defeat and acknowledging him as her master. Cyan's expression eased with satisfaction. He told himself that his task was complete and it was time to return, for he had already been gone too long. Leaving the basement with Kiram at his side, he listened to her voice filled with relief as she breathed in the open air again. She called out to him and asked for his name. He responded that he was Cyan Vert. She repeated his name, remarking that she had never heard it before, and questioned why Air had chosen someone so young. Cyan calmly explained that it was because of his past life. Kiram tilted her head in confusion at his words, pressing him for clarification. He told her plainly that he had died once before. Shock widened her eyes as she turned her gaze toward the holy sword Duran Dark, still resting silently upon its altar. She muttered that it remained asleep, and Cyan replied that it would remain so for another 20 years until its chosen owner arrived. Kiram grew suspicious of his knowledge, her expression dark with realization. Cyan, however, paid her no mind. Instead, he grasped his demonic blade tightly and brought it down upon the hilt of the holy sword. The resounding crack filled the temple, leaving Kiram startled and fearful. She asked in alarm what he intended to do with the broken relic. Cyan only smiled with a mischievous gleam in his eyes. His answer was deliberately vague, suggesting that perhaps it would make the future far more interesting. The afternoon sun marked the day Cyan had long anticipated. A carriage departed from the ancestral mansion while Cyan stood clad in armor, his thoughts heavy with the weight of the moment. He reflected inwardly, realizing how quickly time had passed and how soon the day of departure had arrived. A soldier approached, offering formal greetings to the Duke. The Duke, Cyan's father, turned to his son with solemnity and questioned him one final time. He reminded Cyan that this was his last chance to reconsider, for the path ahead would lead him to the battlefront. Should he wish to step back, his father would not prevent him. Cyan bowed deeply and affirmed his decision. His heart was already tied to the battlefront, and there was no room for retreat. Hearing this, the Duke ordered his knight, Yurkin, to proceed. Yurkin responded with obedience, drawing forth a magic scroll. From its surface a glowing circle spread, filling the ground with radiant light. A beast soon emerged from within the circle, its body composed of fire, its eyes burning with hunger. The soldiers identified it as a hellhound, a low-ranked demonic beast that had originated from the Lemia Valley. Cyan studied the creature intently, realizing the difficulty his father and the knights must have endured to prepare such a trial. He tightened his grip around his sword, aware that intervention would come only if the danger became overwhelming. The Duke, watching closely, declared that responsibility came with every action and that Cyan must prove his resolve by enduring the trial. Only by facing the beast head-on could he show the strength of his conviction. The word trial echoed in Cyan's mind, reminding him of a previous conversation with Yurkin. At that time, there had been only 3 days remaining before his promise to his father reached its deadline. He had grown restless with the monotony of swinging his sword in empty practice, craving the feeling of a true fight. When he asked Yurkin to spar with him, the knight hesitated, suggesting instead that someone closer to his age, such as young Master Kranz, might serve as a suitable partner. Cyan had quickly dismissed the idea, explaining that Kranz always avoided him. Yurkin had silently admitted that the boy was troublesome before agreeing to the duel. Yurkin had promised to fight only defensively, using his sword sheath rather than his blade, so that Cyan could strike without hesitation. Cyan had thanked him for the offer and demanded one more condition. No matter what happened during the duel, Yurkin was forbidden from revealing the event to the Duke. This was not a request but an order. Though curious about Cyan's determination, Yurkin had no chance to inquire further, for Cyan attacked without warning. The force behind Cyan's blows surprised Yurkin. The sheath in his hand absorbed the weight of strikes far heavier than what could be expected from a child of 10 years. Cyan's speed astonished him as well. Each step was quick, each swing sharper than the last. A moment of distraction was enough for Cyan to vanish from Yurkin's sight, only to reappear behind him with another powerful strike. Yurkin held his ground, keeping to his promise to defend rather than retaliate, yet the relentless pace of Cyan's swordplay impressed him deeply. Cyan soon stepped back, acknowledging that victory was still out of his reach. He thanked Yurkin for the spar, though his expression carried a measure of satisfaction. Yurkin, equally surprised, praised him in return. Within his heart, Yurkin reflected on the change he had witnessed. The once frail young master had grown into someone capable of facing trials without hesitation. If his instincts were correct, then Cyan was already strong enough to overcome any obstacle that awaited him. Returning to the present, Cyan stood before the summoned beast. Without hesitation, his body flickered from sight, moving swiftly across the battlefield. He closed the distance in an instant, his blade carving a strike into the monster as he passed. He knew his current strength was not enough to prolong such a fight. Only a decisive attack could bring victory. Determined to end the battle quickly, he poured all of his energy into his right hand, raising his sword high above him. His body soared into the air before plunging downward, his weapon driving through the monster's skull with a force that silenced the battlefield. The spectacle left the knights in awe. The Duke's expression brightened with delight, pride reflected in his eyes as he watched his son's triumph. Cyan gazed at the lifeless creature and allowed himself a fleeting thought. The wasted blood of such a beast seemed enough to fill several bottles. Yet if he were to attempt collecting it here, others might mistake him for mad. He considered whether it might be wise to carry a vessel for such occasions. The Duke's applause broke his contemplation. He commended Cyan for his impressive display and promised to meet him again on the battlefront. Cyan lowered his head respectfully, offering his gratitude. At that moment, a voice resonated within his mind. It was Kiram, the demonic sword bound to him. Kiram's tone carried irritation as he compared himself to a kitchen knife, asking whether Cyan truly saw him as such. Cyan responded inwardly, reminding Kiram that he was no ordinary weapon but a demonic sword. Kiram pressed further, demanding to be used properly. He longed for blood, for it was the source of his strength. Even a single taste would suffice, yet Cyan had deprived him of it. Cyan reassured the weapon, promising that the time would soon come when he would wield him freely. When that moment arrived, Kiram would drink to his heart's content. Kiram, however, grew frustrated, insisting that Cyan should have awakened him at the crucial moment. the battlefield stretched into chaos as a group of ogres stormed across the northwest ridge. Shouts rang out across the lines as commanders barked orders for a defensive formation. The soldiers were instructed to restrain the advancing creatures, to allow none of them to survive. The air grew thick with tension as the chants of magic filled the atmosphere. Brilliant light burst from spell formations, forcing the ogres to shield their eyes as smaller circles of magic appeared beneath them. From those circles, luminous threads shot forth, binding their massive limbs and immobilizing them against the earth. The command to attack was given. With discipline and fervor, the army surged forward, weapons raised high, raining destruction upon the bewildered ogres who could do nothing but brace themselves for death. Some of the creatures attempted to retreat, yet their efforts were swiftly crushed. A warrior rushed forward, cleaving through one of them in a single decisive strike. Its head flew across the field and landed near Cyan, who sat mounted upon his horse, calmly observing the scene. His maid Emily stood just behind him, her face pale with fright at the horror of the battlefield. She clutched at herself nervously, unable to hide her trembling. Emily asked why Cyan had insisted on coming to such a place, her voice quivering as she confessed her fear. Cyan, however, simply watched the slaughter and thought to himself with a strange calmness that the sight felt nostalgic, for the battlefield remained as hellish as he remembered. Soon after, Duke Vert, his father, approached and questioned how it felt for him to stand on the front lines. Cyan admitted with honesty that he felt nervous, though he maintained his composure. The Duke reminded him that death lurked everywhere here and that he should never let his guard down. Cyan responded with a confident smile, assuring him that he would remain cautious. The Duke did not linger, for the front demanded his constant attention. The front lines were known to endure 3 to 4 battles a day, each with its own meticulous tactical manuals. The core of these defenses was built upon the strength of the advanced knights, whose duty was to prevent monsters from breaching the line. When the battle finally subsided, Cyan returned to his assigned tent, which was located in the safest rear area. Guards maintained their discipline in every corner, a presence so constant that Cyan found himself thinking he would not even have a chance to feed Kiram until mealtime. He grew restless at the idea of waiting. Turning to Emily, he asked what she was doing. She reminded him of the Duke's warning that no one could predict when or where death might come. Cyan considered her words, finding them hard to believe. He suggested she could return if she was so worried, though Emily firmly refused. She told him that she could not leave his side, for without her care he would not manage, especially in a place swarming with monsters. She urged him to prepare, since it was almost time to eat. Cyan then inquired about the cloak he had requested, yet Emily ignored the question. He grew irritated, wondering if he should simply dismiss her for her disregard. To him, it felt insolent for a servant to treat her master in such a way. Later, Emily placed a doll resembling Cyan upon the bed, ensuring it looked convincing enough to mask his absence. Cyan considered it sufficient for deception. Emily, noticing his preparation, asked whether he intended to exercise even in such a dangerous place. Cyan confirmed that he did and casually remarked that she remained diligent as ever. She reminded him that the Duke would be proud if he discovered his effort. Pulling on a cloak, Cyan instructed her to maintain the usual routine and to ensure his supposed presence while he slipped away. She agreed without further protest. Once outside, Cyan moved quickly. The guards at the front were vigilant during the night, so he needed to act before the patrols grew too tight. Summoning his skill, he invoked the third move of the mist technique, Mist's Descent. Thick fog rolled out around him, veiling his movements. He recalled that this land was crawling with monsters, which made it the perfect place to train with Kiram. He whispered inwardly to his partner, asking if it was not ideal. Kiram, the presence bound to his blade, responded with eagerness. The scent of blood excited it, urging Cyan to let it cut down prey. At that very moment, a pack of hellhounds lunged toward him, their eyes glowing with feral hunger. Cyan acknowledged Kiram's desire and engaged without hesitation. With Mist Sword's technique, rushing Miststorm, he darted into the pack, slicing through them with swift, fatal strikes. The hounds fell one after another, their bodies collapsing in silence as the fog swirled around Cyan's figure. When the battle was over, Cyan knelt beside one of the corpses. He inserted a tube into its vein and allowed the blood to flow into a wooden cup. Raising it, he drank deeply, savoring the metallic taste. He remarked with satisfaction that this was exactly what Kiram needed. Kiram exhaled in exhilaration, confessing that it had never felt so refreshed since awakening. Cyan commended the progress, telling it to continue training with such vigor. Kiram then questioned how long it would take before they grew stronger by slaughtering such beasts. Cyan assured it that the night was still young and there would be no shortage of monsters. Ahead of them, a herd of beasts loomed, waiting for the inevitable clash. Kiram, thrilled at the prospect, declared its excitement. Far from the battlefield, a convoy of horse-drawn carriages rolled steadily along the dirt road. Inside one of the carriages sat a young woman with flowing white hair. She was the royal princess of the empire. Her attendants voiced concern that the front lines were too dangerous and suggested retreat. The princess, however, reminded them of her duty to support her father in his tours and scolded them for treating her as though she were still a child. She insisted that they cease questioning her resolve, warning that she would lose her patience if the matter were raised again. Her attendants yielded to her will. One of them then mentioned hearing news of the youngest son of the Vert family being stationed at the front. The Duke, despite initial reluctance, had allowed his son to volunteer. The attendant suggested that the princess, who was of similar age, should try to befriend him. The princess dismissed the idea, claiming she cared little for trivial matters such as that. She leaned back and prepared to rest, though before she closed her eyes she asked his name. The attendant recalled it, confirming that the boy was called Cyan Vert. The princess repeated the name softly to herself, her expression unreadable as the carriage rolled onward. The battlefield of the Vert family was filled with the lingering stench of blood and ash as the last of the monsters were struck down. A bird-shaped beast collapsed with a resounding thud, its body lifeless under the coordinated attacks of the soldiers. The clash slowly died down, and silence replaced the chaos of battle. The Duke of Vert raised his voice, commanding his soldiers to check for the wounded. A few moments later, the soldiers replied in unison, affirming that no one had been injured. Satisfied, the Duke praised their efforts and urged them to return quickly. As the soldiers gathered themselves, Cyan stood apart, his sword already sheathed after felling the last creature in his path. His calm expression hid the exhaustion that lingered beneath the surface. The Duke's eyes shifted to his youngest son and lingered for a moment before he spoke, asking Cyan how he was adjusting to life on the front lines. Cyan, maintaining his respectful composure, replied that he was learning something new every day. His father raised an eyebrow, surprised at the answer. He remarked that he had expected Cyan to desire a swift return home, yet he had endured for longer than anticipated. For the first time, the Duke openly expressed pride in his son. With that, he turned away, instructing Cyan to come to his tent early the next morning as he had something to discuss. Cyan responded obediently, though inwardly he was unsettled. His father had never shown him such kindness before. Night descended upon the valley, and in the depths of monster territory, the ground trembled with violent movements. The earth split as a massive death worm emerged, its grotesque form thrashing about with destructive force. Cyan narrowly avoided its sudden strike, his sharp instincts guiding him out of harm's way. He recognized the beast immediately. Deathworms typically lurk deeper within the valley, far from the outer battlefields. Their presence near the surface was abnormal and troubling. Within his mind, Kiram's voice echoed, her tone sly yet enticing. She suggested that he let her take control, claiming it would be far more efficient. Cyan narrowed his eyes, accusing her of plotting something beneath her words. Kiram denied it, swearing that she would only use his body briefly to deliver the finishing blow. She pointed out the creature's rapid regeneration, noting that shallow strikes would never kill it. Cyan considered her reasoning and reluctantly admitted she was correct. His own efforts would eventually prove futile. It had already been a month since he arrived at the front lines. He had consumed the blood of countless demonic beasts, yet it still felt insufficient. Faced with the deathworm's menacing approach, Cyan made his decision. He allowed Kiram to act, though he did not trust her. He resolved to play along with her schemes, at least for now. A surge of power erupted as Kiram responded gleefully. The fusion process began, and Cyan's body was enveloped in a blood-soaked aura. The ninth form of the Mist Sword, the demonic manifestation, awakened. The air trembled as sharp blades of crimson energy tore through the worm's hide. Cyan declared his intent to shred the creature's thick flesh. In that moment, his figure overlapped with the demonic sword under the blood-red moon, radiating a dreadful brilliance. With precision, he unleashed the technique known as Mist Sword, 8 fluttering petals. The deathworm's massive body was cleaved apart, reduced to pieces that fell motionless upon the battlefield. Not far away, patrol soldiers stumbled upon the remains. They studied the corpse with unease, remarking that it had been killed only recently. Yurkin, one of the Duke's most trusted men, approached with a torch in hand. He muttered that the traces of mana around the corpse felt overwhelming, far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary soldier. The Duke, upon inspecting the scene himself, grew serious. If a demon was involved, it could not be ignored. He ordered the corpse to be burned immediately and demanded a thorough inspection of the area. As the soldiers carried out his command, the Duke silently examined the sword marks etched into the monster's body. The pattern struck a familiar chord in his memory, leaving him unsettled. Yurkin drew his attention to the corpse once more, confirming that the slain beast was indeed a deathworm. The possibility of an unknown force, or even a hidden organization, was raised. The Duke's expression darkened as he contemplated the matter further. Meanwhile, Cyan collapsed onto his bed within his tent, utterly drained. He reflected grimly on what had transpired. Using Kiram's power to defeat a single monster had pushed his body close to its limits. Without the demonic blood he had consumed, his body would have broken down entirely. Kiram's voice returned, analyzing him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She noted that his mastery of her power, his knowledge of the valley, and his refined swordsmanship were far beyond what could be expected of someone his age. She confronted him, declaring that he must be a regressor. Cyan replied with feigned indifference, his expression careless. He insisted that he had already made it obvious by mentioning his previous death. Kiram grew irritated, claiming that his vague hints explained nothing. He brushed her complaints aside, too uninterested to clarify further. Kiram speculated aloud that his death must have come at the hands of the Durand Dark family, either through a duel or betrayal, and she leaned toward the latter. Cyan questioned her reasoning, to which she answered bluntly. His disdainful look toward the holy sword had revealed enough. She warned him that if he faltered, she would consume him entirely. Cyan's response was swift and violent. He struck her hard, sending her reeling, and commanded her to remember her place. Despite her anger, Kiram fell silent. Cyan, however, smiled to himself. She had not changed at all. She was the same as in his previous life. Stepping out of his tent, Cyan noticed an unusual tension hanging in the air. The camp seemed restless. Emily, one of the attendants, approached him with concern. She informed him that a corpse of a high-level monster had been discovered near the valley entrance. Cyan immediately realized she was referring to the death worm and grew uneasy. Emily explained that such a sighting was rare and troubling. Cyan, anxious about being discovered, pressed her for more details. He asked if there had been rumors of suspicious individuals or anything else that might point toward him. Before Emily could answer fully, Yurkin appeared and delivered a message. The Duke had summoned Cyan at once. Inside his father's camp, Cyan greeted him respectfully, kneeling as the youngest son of the Vert family. His mind raced with unease. If his father questioned him about the slain worm, he had no ready excuse. Cyan sat across from his father inside the command tent, listening as the man's sharp gaze fell upon him. His father asked directly what he had been doing the previous night. Cyan, feigning calmness while concealing his unease, explained that he had gone to bed early because of exhaustion. The answer did not fully satisfy his father, who quietly wondered to himself if those familiar sword traces on the corpse of the death worm were truly just his imagination. The thought lingered, but he remained uncertain. Cyan, pretending not to notice his father's doubt, inquired why the question was asked in the first place. His father did not answer immediately. Instead, he reflected on the possibility that a child as young as Cyan could not have been the one to kill a creature as powerful as a death worm. Sensing the silence, Cyan pressed again, asking if something was troubling him. Eventually, his father responded, explaining that there had been an incident near the camps the previous night. He spoke of a mysterious assassin organization known as Mist, which had likely been involved. Cyan, keeping his composure, showed ignorance of the matter, though he was fully aware of its weight. His father continued, describing Mist as an ancient organization whose motives remained unclear. They had taken countless lives of nobles under the guise of purification and were infamous for leaving behind a black mist wherever they appeared. Though they had vanished more than 3 centuries ago, the corpse of the deathworm was enveloped in the very same mist, suggesting that the organization had returned. Black mist was known as the Mark of Air, the god of darkness and the deity whom Mist served. His father concluded that if his assumptions were correct, Mist had slain both the death worm and the other demonic beasts in the area. Cyan marveled inwardly at the accuracy of his father's deduction. The man had managed to pinpoint the culprit with near perfection despite the long passage of time since Mist had last been seen. His father then advised Cyan to remain cautious and assured him that the Empire would be informed while further investigation was conducted. Cyan answered obediently, thinking to himself that his father seemed inclined to believe his innocence. His father considered the matter once more and firmly reasoned that it made no sense for a boy so young to be involved with such a notorious group. With that, he ended the subject and shifted the discussion elsewhere. He asked if Cyan knew about the special visit planned for the day. Cyan replied that he had heard rumors of the Emperor's arrival, though he had not been certain it was to take place that very day. His father confirmed it with a faint smile and admitted that he wanted a favor regarding the visit. Before he could elaborate further, a soldier's voice rang out from outside, announcing the arrival of the Emperor. Cyan's father, Villiers, stepped outside and immediately knelt down to greet the Emperor respectfully. The Emperor, seated on horseback, addressed Villiers warmly, reminding him that they were old friends and telling him not to be overly formal. Though Villiers was given permission to rise, he still showed signs of restraint. The emperor's eyes then moved toward Cyan, recognizing him as the youngest son of the Vert family. Cyan bowed deeply, introducing himself with proper respect, and the emperor expressed admiration that one so young was enduring life in such a harsh environment. Cyan internally realized that his father's favor was simply for him to present himself as his son before the emperor, something far less demanding than what he had imagined. In his previous life, he had always been confined within the mansion whenever the emperor visited, so this encounter was an unfamiliar experience. Emily, who stood nearby, expressed her excitement at seeing the emperor in person, marveling at the trust Villiers placed in his son. The emperor then called forward a servant and introduced a guest of his own. From a decorated carriage stepped a young woman who introduced herself as Erin Sevelis, the fifth princess of the Wusif Empire. Cyan regarded her carefully, recalling her reputation as the tragic princess from his previous life. After the introductions, Villiers brought Cyan back to the camp and informed him that he would be escorting Princess Erin for the day. Cyan questioned the purpose of the assignment, but his father reassured him, explaining that the task was simply to keep her company. Since they were of the same age, it was likely they would meet again at the academy. Villiers also emphasized that befriending a member of the royal family would bring no harm and might even prove beneficial. Cyan silently acknowledged the reasoning. Though he had no personal desire to accompany the princess, he understood his father's intention to forge bonds similar to the friendship he shared with the emperor. However, Cyan knew from his previous life that Erin was not someone who could become his friend. Keeping that knowledge to himself, he chose to obey quietly. While escorting Erin, they arrived near the infamous blood river of Lemia Valley. Erin, alarmed by its crimson waters, asked why it was so red. Cyan explained that the river gained its color from the corpses and fluids of demonic beasts that leapt into it when too old or injured to survive. Their remains, dissolved through mana-infused decomposition, had permanently stained the current. Erin, horrified, asked if the river truly contained nothing but corpses and fluids. Cyan confirmed it and warned her against entering, explaining that the beasts themselves drank and bathed in it. She grimaced with disgust and asked where the river ended. Cyan mischievously told her that it led directly into the demon realm, even suggesting with a smirk that following it long enough might lead her to the demon king himself. Though he knew no one in their right mind would attempt such a journey, he found amusement in teasing her. Their conversation was interrupted by a flare in the sky. Erin, startled, asked about the signal, and Cyan explained that it came from the western outpost. A yellow flare signified an approaching wave of demonic beasts. Villiers quickly ordered the protection of the emperor while preparing to lead the guardian knights to the front. The emperor, rather than staying behind, insisted on joining the battle, expressing that he had grown bored and wished to participate in the raid. Though Villiers hesitated, he eventually complied. The emperor commanded his soldiers to focus entirely on slaying the beasts until the raid ended, and they responded in unison with unwavering loyalty. Villiers then instructed Cyan to join as well. Cyan agreed immediately, though Princess Erin was shocked to hear that he would be fighting. She demanded to accompany him, insisting she was capable since they were of the same age. Cyan, frustrated with her reckless words, summoned Yurkin. Yurkin appeared with an imposing presence, declaring his duty to escort the princess to safety in place of the royal knights. Though Erin protested angrily, Cyan silenced her with a stern warning. He explained that her stubbornness could cost dozens of lives and that every decision on the battlefield determined survival or death. Faced with his sharp words, Erin nearly burst into tears, unable to counter him. Cyan left her behind with the knights, remarking that she should return to safety if she intended to cry like a child. At the battlefield's center, chaos unfolded as a massive snail-like monster devoured soldiers without restraint. The troops shouted to one another to hold their ground and not retreat. Villiers entered the fray with his blade drawn, commanding his forces to regain formation, protect the emperor, and slay every monster without exception. The soldiers, galvanized by his presence, roared in unison and charged forward with renewed determination. Dion Sevelis, the emperor of the Wusif Empire, had lived with 2 wives throughout his reign. His first wife, Diana Kusal, was once empress but she passed away, leaving behind the first and second princesses. His second wife, Cassandra Nephilis, held a prominent position within the empire as its judiciary and gave birth to the third prince and the fourth prince. Amid this royal household, Erin Sevelis, the fifth princess, was born to a peasant mistress. Her mixed blood earned her scorn, and many regarded her as little more than a scarecrow in the palace. She endured such treatment in silence, fulfilling her duties as part of the royal family while devoting herself to her studies more diligently than anyone else. Despite her efforts, jealousy and resentment surrounded her. Those who despised her arranged a plot that framed her for treason. She was cast out of the royal family and stripped of her place in the empire. Rumors soon spread that she had died of disease in isolation on a distant island. People whispered her story as that of the tragic princess. Had she lived without ambition, she might have found peace, yet her supposed greed for recognition condemned her to that fate. As this story was recalled in conversation, Kiram asked Cyan if this was not the very tale his father had once told him in his previous life. Cyan, standing amidst battle against demonic beasts, dismissed the suggestion. He reminded himself that such stories were nothing more than the harsh truth of royal politics. Lightning soon descended upon the battlefield, striking with overwhelming force. A colossal snail was pierced and cooked where it stood. More snails were obliterated in a similar fashion, their shells cracking under the divine storm. Cyan observed carefully as Emperor Dion demonstrated his holy lightning, the magic that carved his name into history. With each strike, the emperor destroyed monsters effortlessly, showing the might of one who commanded both throne and power. Cyan reflected silently on what he knew. Dion was publicly acknowledged as an 8th-star mage, a rank that only a handful ever attained. Had he not taken the throne, he would likely have become head of the Mage Association. For such a man, an intermediate-ranked demonic beast was nothing more than a minor obstacle. To him, the slaughter seemed almost like a pastime. When the battle subsided, calm returned to the camp. The emperor sat with Villiers, Cyan's father, sharing a rare moment of leisure. They sipped wine beneath the safety of the command tent. Dion joked that it had been long since he shared a drink with Villiers, although he felt lonely drinking alone. Villiers declined to indulge, explaining that he never allowed himself alcohol while serving on the front lines. Dion shifted the subject and spoke of troubling events within the empire. A surge of assassinations had shaken the nobility, leaving unease throughout the land. Villiers asked if there was any clear pattern in the killings. The emperor explained that each victim had been a corrupt official. More importantly, black mist had been present at every crime scene. The mention of black mist stirred Villiers' thoughts. He remembered what he had encountered recently near the valley. He quietly revealed that he had found traces of the same presence nearby. The emperor reasoned that the black mist followers had indeed resurfaced. Although he appreciated Villiers' efforts in removing corrupted elements, he insisted that the matter required further investigation. He worried not only for the order of the empire but also for the safety of the people. Dion then revealed another concern. Some nobles had begun to whisper that the assassinations were connected to Princess Erin. Villiers confirmed if the emperor truly meant that certain factions were attempting to tie her to the murders. Dion explained that he had dismissed such claims as nonsense, yet there were groups eager to use her as a pawn. He then asked Villiers, not as an emperor but as a friend, for a personal favor. If he were to die before his trusted companion, he wished for Villiers to protect Erin. Villiers gave his word with utmost seriousness. He promised that he would carry out the emperor's request without hesitation. Gratified by this loyalty, Dion thanked him sincerely. Rain soon poured across the campsite. Inside Cyan's tent, Emily expressed her frustration. She criticized Cyan for ending his escort of Princess Erin so abruptly. She warned him that if he continued to treat noblewomen so coldly, marriage would remain out of reach. Cyan dismissed her words lightly, insisting he had not been on any kind of date, and prepared to leave the tent. He instructed Emily to handle matters in his absence. Concerned by the heavy rain, Emily asked if he truly intended to train again. Cyan reassured her before stepping outside. At the camp gate, he encountered a figure cloaked in rain. The stranger removed the hood, revealing Princess Erin. She had sought him out despite the storm, asking for his time. Emily looked on nervously, but Cyan dismissed her so he could speak with the princess alone. Erin apologized for her earlier behavior during their last encounter. She admitted she had not acted in a way befitting a princess. Cyan replied courteously, telling her there was no need to dwell on the matter. She smiled faintly, then her expression grew sorrowful. She confessed her envy of him, noting how others acknowledged his strength and maturity while she remained disregarded. Cyan realized in that moment the fragility hidden beneath her composure. Erin then spoke of the future, suggesting that since both would attend the academy, perhaps they could build a bond. Before she could finish, Cyan declined. He told her he could not be of help and asked her to leave if friendship was her intent. His words chilled her, and she trembled in unease. She asked if he, too, believed she was merely an empty shell of a princess. Receiving no answer, she forced a smile, apologized for wasting his time, and prepared to leave. Before departing, she mentioned that he was nothing like Sir Ekel. The mention of that name struck Cyan deeply. Ekel, his brother who had once betrayed him, was not someone he expected to hear from her. Shock overwhelmed him. He grabbed her hand before she could leave, demanding to know how she was connected to Ekel. Erin explained that she had met Ekel during a tour of the academy. He had advised her not to care about others' judgment and to focus only on fulfilling her role as a princess. Cyan, seething inwardly, recognized the scheme. He knew his brother better than anyone. He realized this was the beginning of a plot against Eren, a plan woven the moment she encountered Ekal. As Cyan prepared to warn her, the ground shook violently. Emily burst into the tent, urging her master to flee. A massive log descended from above, striking Cyan's tent and crushing everything within its range. The entire camp erupted into chaos. Emily, narrowly escaping the destruction, cried out desperately for her master. A towering monster loomed before them, gripping a tree trunk like a weapon, its appearance marking the beginning of another brutal confrontation. The shock of the sudden assault had already reached the Imperial camp where King Dion and Duke Villiers were stationed. Both men were troubled, uncertain of the nature of the disturbance. Their tension deepened when a soldier entered the tent to deliver urgent news. The king's expression darkened immediately as he demanded an explanation. The soldier reported that advanced-ranked demonic beasts had launched an ambush on the rear camps of the border region. He added that Princess Eren had been present when the attack began. Alarmed, King Dion ordered the immediate deployment of the Imperial army to secure the rear camps and ensure the princess's safety. The soldier saluted sharply and departed to carry out the command. For a moment, the king pondered the matter. If the princess was at the rear camp, whom had she gone there to see? The scene shifted to the rear camp itself, where chaos reigned. Demonic beasts had descended in overwhelming numbers. Among them were towering ogres and massive deathworms that should only have appeared deep within the valley, far from any human settlement. Their sudden presence in this area was unnatural. Cyan, who had narrowly survived the initial strike, concealed himself to assess the situation. He quickly recognized the oddity of the attack. These beasts did not belong here. For them to suddenly emerge, something fundamental must have changed. His suspicion lingered on himself. He wondered if his presence was the reason for this unnatural convergence. Nearby, Emily, his devoted maid, sobbed with relief as she clung to him. She admitted that she had thought he was dead and swore never to leave his side again. The memory of how they survived the first wave still burned vividly in her mind. When the monsters had descended from above, Cyan had reacted swiftly. He had grabbed hold of Princess Eren and pulled her to safety, narrowly avoiding the fatal blow that crushed the ground where they had stood. His calm thought at that time revealed his confidence. In his past life, he had slain the Demon King himself. To fall to a mere troll would have been unthinkable. Princess Eren, though shaken, worried for the knights stationed throughout the camps. Emily sought to reassure her, reminding her that the knights were formidable protectors of the empire. Overcome by guilt, Eren wept in Emily's embrace. She blamed herself for drawing the beasts to the camp and for endangering those around her. Yet the knights who remained by her side pledged their lives to her service. With determined smiles, they declared that their duty as Imperial Knights was to protect her at all costs. The mood shifted when Cyan's expression hardened. He sensed danger that the others had failed to notice. He ordered the knights to move, but before they could grasp his meaning, the attack came. A troll's massive hand reached from behind, crushing one of the knights in its grip. The others recoiled in horror. Cyan immediately stepped forward to shield Eren, instructing her to retreat. The troll, however, seemed to recognize something in him. Cyan quickly realized that he was the true target of the beast. The troll discarded the knight's broken body and focused solely on him. Cyan urged the others to use the opportunity to flee with the princess. Emily did not hesitate. She grabbed hold of Eren and hurried her away, though Cyan noticed bitterly that she seemed far too eager to escape. The troll advanced with both arms raised to strike, yet Cyan met the attack without fear. With a swift motion, his sword cut through one of the beast's arms. Even as the limb fell, questions gnawed at him. Why were these advanced-ranked beasts all converging on him? He sensed as though they could smell something clinging to his body. Kiram, the demonic entity bound within him, answered with a malicious chuckle. It explained that Cyan's strength had come from drinking the blood of countless demonic beasts. The scent of that blood now drew them to him. Cyan's frustration boiled over as he demanded why Kiram had hidden this truth from him. Kiram's smirk was filled with mocking amusement as it reminded him of its goal. What Kiram desired most was his body. Though angered, Cyan dismissed Kiram's taunts. He refused to yield, declaring that no number of monsters could break him. Without hesitation, he charged again, evading the troll's heavy punch and cutting clean through its neck. The giant's body collapsed to the earth with a thunderous crash. Kiram, reveling in the violence, urged him to drink more of the beast's blood. Ahead, a horde of other monstrous forms emerged from the shadows, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Kiram's glee only grew as it anticipated the feast to come. Then Cyan's eyes caught something different among them. A massive dragon, its scales a striking shade of purple, appeared. He recognized it instantly and exclaimed in shock. It was a devil dragon. Its roar thundered across the battlefield. Kiram quickly corrected him. It was still a juvenile, though its strength remained terrifying. It too, like the others, had been drawn to him. Cyan's lips curled into a dangerous smile. The reason for its presence no longer mattered. He summoned his demonic sword, merging his body with Kiram's essence. With cold determination, he resolved to catch the dragon. Kiram, delighted, declared that they should devour it. Elsewhere in the camp, golden lightning bolts rained down, annihilating the last of the monsters in that sector. King Dion, standing amidst the aftermath, asked Duke Villiers if this marked the end of the assault. Villiers confirmed it, though his expression remained grim. The king inquired about Princess Erin and Cyan. Villiers admitted he could not trace them beyond the tents. The king offered his sympathy, noting that Villiers must be worried about his son. Villiers, however, dismissed the concern with calm certainty. There was no need to worry about Cyan. His son knew how to fend for himself. What mattered most now was securing the princess. The king regarded his words as unusually cold for a father, but Villiers did not waver. At that moment, a soldier rushed in with urgent news. Princess Erin had been found. She burst into the tent, calling out for her father. The king anxiously checked her for injuries, but she ignored his concern, begging him instead to help save someone. Confused, the king asked whom she spoke of. Through tears, she explained that it was Cyan. The king pressed her to remain calm and explain, and Villiers stepped forward to address Emily directly. He asked if she was Cyan's maid. Trembling, Emily confirmed it. Villiers' expression darkened as he demanded to know what had happened to his son. Emily quaked under his fierce gaze. She stammered that Cyan had sacrificed himself to act as bait, giving them time to escape. Villiers' eyes grew sharper, but he remained outwardly composed. A nearby soldier volunteered to lead a rescue effort if Villiers would only give the order. King Dion urged him to act quickly, but Villiers refused. He declared that the survival of the empire came before all else. If the camps fell, the beasts would pour into the empire unchecked. Reconstruction and defense were the priority. Emily's voice trembled as she asked about Cyan, but Villiers coldly replied that his son had already fulfilled his duty by ensuring the princess's safety. That was the burden of being a Vert. Princess Erin was struck with despair. Her heart ached as she blamed herself once again. Before she could respond, a thunderous cry from above silenced the camp. They all looked up to see a dragon soaring across the skies. To Erin's shock, clinging desperately to its leg was Cyan. His face was twisted with both determination and anguish as he refused to let go, even as tears streamed down his face. Dragons, regarded as the closest beings to the Creator, were revered as rare and noble creatures. They were feared and respected alike, for humans and other inferior beings rarely dared to approach them. After clashing with such a formidable presence, Cyan found himself dangling from the leg of a young dragon as it soared across the skies. His face betrayed discomfort, for he never imagined his battle would lead to such a precarious situation. Deep within, he thought it might have been an honor to encounter such a creature, yet questioned why the dragon had chosen to fly directly over the camps where no one should have witnessed him. Below, the dragon's shadow passed over the tents of the Imperial forces. Erin stood frozen, watching in disbelief as Cyan clung desperately to the creature's scaled body. Her voice trembled as she called his name, unable to comprehend the sight before her. The king was equally shocked, demanding to know how a dragon could suddenly appear in the battlefield and why Villiers' son was caught in such a dangerous position. Villiers, despite his composed demeanor, struggled internally as his gaze remained locked upon Cyan. High above, Cyan tightened his grip, cursing his own reckless excitement. His earlier intention had only been to taste the blood of the dragon, not to be carried away into the sky. The scene then traced back to the moments leading to this outcome. When the dragon had first appeared, Cyan's spirit burned with thrill. With Kiram, his demonic companion, he declared that the beast must be caught, or perhaps devoured. Yet before reaching the dragon, a horde of large monsters had surrounded him, seeking to tear him apart. With no hesitation, Cyan unleashed his technique, the mist sword rushing mist storm. His body moved like a violent storm, weaving through hundreds of monstrous bodies, leaving only torn remains in his wake. When the dust settled, he stood before the dragon. Assessing its size, Cyan realized it was not fully grown, which only fueled his excitement further. The dragon, sensing his presence, opened its maw and released a blinding beam of energy. Cyan responded with irritation, swiftly dodging and closing in on the creature's head. Kiram, merging with him, complained about the audacity of being attacked so directly. In return, Cyan struck at the dragon's face, delivering 2 sharp blows that left the beast reeling. The dragon roared, releasing a shockwave that pushed Cyan backward, but this only heightened his determination. As the dragon lunged with its horn, Cyan evaded and unleashed another skill, swordless eighth fluttering petals. His figure blurred through the air, slicing across the dragon's massive form with a flurry of precise strikes. The beast plummeted from the sky, crashing into the earth in a cloud of dust. Cyan, catching his breath, admitted to himself that a dragon was far more difficult than he anticipated, though his grin showed that he relished the challenge. As the dragon rose again, its eyes glowed with sharp hostility. Its body stirred violent winds that threatened to topple everything nearby. Cyan steadied himself, vowing not to fall for the same tactic. To his surprise, however, the dragon suddenly turned away, retreating with its tail low as though recognizing defeat. Cyan panicked, unwilling to lose his prize, and immediately launched himself into the sky after it. This pursuit was what led to the current moment, where he clutched tightly onto the dragon's leg, grumbling that his fortune had both blessed and cursed him at once. Kiram's voice echoed, urging Cyan to act. Cyan, frustrated, argued that striking the dragon openly while flying over the army would expose his demonic powers, making him a target of execution. Kiram sneered at his hesitation, demanding he act rather than cling helplessly. While Cyan debated with himself, Villiers below prepared a grand spell. Cyan's eyes widened, recognizing the legendary 8-star secret sword of the heavens forming through golden blades around a vast circle. Villiers intended to bring the dragon down regardless of his son's position. Cyan muttered that his father truly lived up to the title of Continent's Guardian, though the realization that he too would be struck brought bitter humor to his expression. The storm of swords ascended, pursuing the dragon with relentless precision. The beast maneuvered through the sky, dodging strike after strike, displaying grace despite its size. Cyan felt exhilarated, cheering for the dragon's resilience. However, a sword slipped through its blind spot, grazing the dragon's leg and dislodging Cyan's grip. He fell freely through the air, lamenting that he had lost the chance at such a rare meal. Kiram berated him, shouting that he would soon kiss the ground. Cyan argued that if he used his mist technique in front of the army, he would be executed, yet despair grew as the earth rushed toward him. In the midst of his fall, Cyan suddenly realized an alternative. With grim acceptance, he prepared himself and descended into the river below, known as the River of Monsters, tainted by the blood of countless demonic beasts. Though foul and dangerous, the impact spared his life. Emerging soaked and gasping for breath, Cyan dragged himself ashore, cursing his misfortune. He asked Kiram if he survived, to which the furious spirit vowed revenge for the humiliation. Cyan tried to lighten the mood, insisting they would recover later, though Kiram reminded him that they had fallen into the demon realm itself. Before Cyan could respond, a familiar voice pierced the air. It belonged to a figure he had hoped never to encounter again. A young demon boy appeared, his aura brimming with confidence and menace. The boy demanded to know if Cyan was truly human. Recognition struck Cyan with a heavy weight as memories resurfaced. This was Valkyrian, the demon king in youthful form, now standing before him with piercing eyes. Cyan realized the situation had shifted from a struggle against beasts to a confrontation with one of the most feared beings in existence. Cyan had faced many dangers in his life, yet none compared to the presence that now loomed before him. In the past, countless people had described this figure as the very embodiment of evil. Seeing him now with his own eyes, Cyan understood why. His breath caught and his instincts screamed at him to escape. He cursed inwardly, muttering Valkyrian's name. It had to be now of all times. Valkyrian's gaze was cold and unyielding as he repeated his earlier question with deliberate patience, asking Cyan to confirm whether he was truly human. Cyan had little time to respond before Valkyrian's form flickered and vanished, reappearing behind him in an instant with murderous intent. The Demon King's voice carried a deadly undertone as he demanded to know if Cyan wanted to fight him. Startled, Cyan swung his dagger backward in desperation, narrowly brushing against Valkyrian. Though his attack connected only slightly, a single strand of Valkyrian's hair fell. For a fleeting moment, Cyan felt as though he had reached his limit. Valkyrian's demeanor suddenly shifted. Instead of rage, he chuckled with amusement. He acknowledged that he had heard rumors of Cyan's limitless potential, and cutting his hair seemed to confirm it. Before anything else could happen, Kiram appeared at the scene, sensing the danger. Kiram remarked that the timing seemed wrong and immediately questioned who the stranger was. Cyan responded through their mental link, explaining that this was none other than the Demon King himself. Kiram froze in disbelief, repeating the words as though unable to process them. He asked Cyan how he intended to defeat such a being in his current weakened state, declaring it impossible. Cyan admitted that survival was his only goal, and escape was the only path available. Yet deep down he wondered if even that was possible. Fortunately, Valkyrian did not appear intent on harming him. The Demon King reassured Cyan in a strangely casual tone, claiming he had no desire to hurt a child. He even suggested that they could continue their conversation while he lay down, making himself appear less threatening. Valkyrian explained that although he might be harsh in many ways, fighting against children was beneath him. This sudden shift unsettled Cyan, who could not understand why the Demon King would choose such a posture. He questioned inwardly what Valkyrian was planning. Valkyrian, still lying down, repeated his earlier inquiry about Cyan's humanity. Cyan confirmed his identity as human, and Valkyrian pressed further, asking how he had arrived in the demon realm. Cyan replied that he had come through the current of the river. Valkyrian studied him with interest, noting that his aura was strange for an ordinary human. He asked Cyan directly if he knew who he truly was. With nervous hesitation, Cyan denied any deeper knowledge, claiming he was just a normal human. Valkyrian smirked, pointing out the contradiction. He insisted that it felt as though Cyan already knew him. Cyan struggled to maintain his composure, insisting they had never met. Valkyrian relaxed, remarking that he himself had never seen a human before, so there could be no prior connection. Still, his playful suspicion remained. Cyan, observing his relaxed demeanor, could not reconcile it with the Demon King he remembered from his past life. Valkyrian then revealed that he had sensed an unusual energy while patrolling his domain. Cyan asked what he meant by making rounds, to which Valkyrian replied that as Demon King it was his duty to oversee his lands. He then paused and asked Cyan to repeat what he had just said. Cyan dutifully answered that Valkyrian had claimed responsibility for ruling over his domain. Valkyrian chuckled, amused that Cyan showed no surprise at his identity. He remarked that most children would be terrified if their parents warned them the Demon King would take them away, yet Cyan had reacted with unnerving composure. This stirred doubt within Cyan. He wondered if Valkyrian truly was the same Demon King who would one day lead the invasion against humanity. If his nature was so different now, something must have occurred to change him in the past. Cyan resolved to prevent that incident if he could. Gathering his courage, he asked Valkyrian directly what his goals were. Valkyrian laughed at the audacity of such a question but answered truthfully. He claimed that his only desire was for his people to live well and eat their fill. However, he warned that if anyone stood in his way, he would destroy them without hesitation. It was his duty as Demon King to ensure the survival and prosperity of his race. A chill ran through Cyan as he sensed the monstrous essence hidden beneath Valkyrian's casual tone. Though repressed for now, it was the same terrifying power that in his past life had brought ruin upon the world. He knew that some future event must have awakened that darkness. Determined to intervene, Cyan proposed a deal. He warned Valkyrian that a looming incident would threaten the demons and that it could escalate into war with humans. Valkyrian narrowed his eyes, demanding clarity. Cyan admitted he did not know the precise details but was certain it would trigger a devastating conflict. Valkyrian asked if Cyan was suggesting he would personally desire to seize human lands. Cyan replied that his only request was a promise that Valkyrian would not start a war, no matter the circumstances. Valkyrian laughed at the audacity of the demand and asked what Cyan could possibly offer in exchange. Cyan answered firmly that he would support Valkyrian to the best of his ability and help him overcome any obstacle. Intrigued, Valkyrian leaned closer, scrutinizing him. He asked Cyan's name. Cyan introduced himself as Cyan Vert. Valkyrian accepted this and gave his word as ruler of the demon realm that he would not invade Cyan's lands, no matter what occurred. As he spoke, great wings unfurled from his back, and he ascended into the sky. Before departing, he warned Cyan to honor his side of the bargain as well, declaring that a deal was a deal. When Valkyrian finally vanished, Cyan was left drained but alive. Before long, soldiers from his clan arrived, having searched desperately for him. They found him lying on the ground, exhausted but unharmed, and escorted him back. His survival against such odds earned him the nickname of the boy who lived through the encounter with the devil dragon. They returned to an abbey at the border of Valus, now serving as a military hospital. When Cyan awoke, he discovered Erin at his bedside. She had been watching over him with concern. Though he had been unconscious, Erin had spoken to him earlier and now asked him to confirm what she had said. Cyan thought everything had been resolved, yet Erin's face grew red as she hesitated. Gathering her courage, she spoke haltingly. She seemed on the verge of asking if he would marry her but stopped midway, instead softly asking if he would be hers. Cyan stared in bewilderment, unable to comprehend the meaning behind her words. His mind reeled with confusion as he silently questioned what exactly she was trying to say. Cyan interrupted without hesitation, his cold response leaving Erin speechless. Realizing the weight of her own words, Erin's expression faltered, and her eyes welled with tears. She muttered sorrowfully that she truly was nothing more than an incompetent princess. In that difficult moment, Cyan observed her with a detached mind. He thought she was already bothersome, but her attitude only worsened the impression she left. He was aware of her flaws, yet the thought that she played some part in her own tragic fate lingered in his mind. He had already made his decision. With a sharp tone, he told Aaron that she could bring no benefit to anyone, least of all him, in her current state. She lacked influence, refinement, and even the most basic sense of etiquette. Drawing closer to her would only harm him. His blunt words struck her fragile heart like a blade. Yet, after a pause, Cyan added that he would still keep watch over her from a distance until she matured into someone better. This statement stirred Aaron deeply. She asked what he meant by watching her. Cyan replied with indifference, urging her not to feel disappointed. Though her emotions swelled, she held back and told him that she understood. She only needed to grow strong enough for him to acknowledge her. With determination, she smiled and declared that one day she would become so powerful he would have no choice but to recognize her. Her confidence puzzled Cyan, though he responded that he looked forward to that day. Within his mind, however, he considered how quickly she recovered from despair. To him, she was still just a child. Before leaving, Aaron turned once more, her cheeks flushed red. She thanked him for simply being alive. Cyan was left bewildered, unable to make sense of her feelings. Far from their exchange, the scene shifted to the outskirts of the rear camp, deep in a forest covered in snow. A cloaked man emerged from the shadows and approached a weathered tree stump. After ensuring no one was watching, he retrieved a radiant cube from his cloak. Smiling with satisfaction, he murmured that only a little remained to complete his work. Suddenly, a voice froze him in place. It revealed his name, Reynold Crimson. Shock gripped him as he realized his body could no longer move, as though invisible chains restrained him. Behind him, Cyan appeared, smirking faintly. He identified the cube as a dimension box, a creation not yet commercialized, crafted with a dimensional realm and enough mana to provide limitless storage. Cyan explained calmly that he had monitored the artifact for an entire year, suspecting that someone within the Empire was smuggling it. Without hesitation, he seized the cube from Reynold's trembling hands. He noted that the Garum Kingdom's Mage Association had developed it and accused Reynold of trafficking such artifacts. Helpless to resist, Reynold could only glare in frustration. Cyan recited his details effortlessly. Reynold Crimson, a 7-star mage knight of the Garum Kingdom. The man was shocked to hear his identity exposed so easily. When Cyan revealed his own face, Reynold trembled in disbelief, recognizing Cyan Vert. Cyan then opened the cube, spilling out the grisly remains of demonic beasts. He deduced that Reynold had drained the blood of these creatures, smuggling them inside supply carriages. He even suspected a spy hidden within the supply department aiding the process. Reynold denied everything, but Cyan dismissed his act. He declared that the blood was already circulating within the black market. Reynold, recalling his transactions with Ellis, suspected her betrayal but remained silent. Cyan studied the monster remains and remarked that, aside from freshness, they were far too large to be edible. Seizing an opportunity, Reynold struggled against the invisible restraint and finally broke free. With a twisted smile, he unleashed a spell, igniting magical flames that surged toward Cyan. He mocked Cyan, declaring that letting one's guard down led to death. Cyan was caught off guard, unable to evade in time. The flames engulfed him, and for a moment he believed death was certain. The rumors about Reynold's fire magic proved true as the flames spread. Reynold sneered at the loss of his dimension box, though he admitted he had not expected such an incident during transport. His triumph was short-lived. In an instant, his hand was severed, spraying blood into the snow. Confusion filled him as a black mist swirled around. When Cyan reappeared before him, alive and seething, Reynold panicked. Cyan slammed him against a tree, gripping his throat with a crushing force. His fury radiated like a storm as he demanded the truth. Reynold was given a choice: reveal the smuggling routes and his spy, or suffer a death so cruel that even the damned would pity him. Elsewhere, at the Velia's western border trading post, merchants conducted their dealings. Two men inspected a set of crates, eager to see the goods. When they opened one box, horror struck them. Inside lay the dismembered remains of Reynold, his severed head drenched in blood. From above, Cyan observed the scene, unmoved. Kiram, standing beside him, asked if he would intervene further. Cyan replied that the warning was enough. He explained that Reynold Crimson, a 7-star mage knight of the Garum Kingdom, had been smuggling demonic beast blood for the Mage Association. That organization, obsessed with unraveling the origin and foundation of magic, sought to surpass human limits. By combining demonic beast blood with artifacts such as the Dimension Box, they pursued dangerous experiments that Cyan intended to stop. As they departed, Kiram teased Cyan, asking if he had changed roles from assassin to problem solver. Irritated, Cyan told him to be silent. Kiram reminded him that his vow had been to live for himself, and this mission seemed far too selfless. Cyan replied firmly that he simply could not allow anyone else to exploit demonic beast blood. Meanwhile, in the Wusif Empire, Ekel, Cyan's older brother, stood by a window, reading letters. Among the contents, Cyan's name appeared. Surprised, Ekel muttered that Cyan had gone to the front lines with their father. An attendant, resting nearby, curiously repeated the name, asking if this referred to Cyan Vert, his half-brother. Ekel's irritation flared as he confirmed it, adding that Cyan had been a constant source of annoyance. With narrowed eyes, he resolved to go see him. At the frontline camp, Emily finished arranging their belongings and her face brightened with relief. She was thrilled that they were finally leaving the battlefield behind. She believed that life at the academy would be far more pleasant compared to the gloom and despair surrounding the front lines. Cyan, however, viewed it differently. To him, the academy represented the beginning of another form of torment. He reflected that it was a place where politics, envy, and rivalry thrived, and where networking outweighed true education. Despite his words, Emily's excitement did not falter. She shared her eagerness about the many instructors she had heard of and laughed about the possibility of romance entering her life. Cyan regarded her with mild curiosity, questioning why she placed such hope in the academy. Her cheerful outlook remained unchanged as she teased about her expectations, while Cyan silently reminded himself of the reality awaiting them. After days of travel, Cyan finally stepped down from the carriage upon reaching his home. He paused to observe the familiar surroundings, though his mind was already unsettled. Without warning, he came across his half-brother Kranz. The encounter was odd, as Kranz appeared frightened the instant his eyes fell on Cyan. Although Cyan attempted to greet him casually, Kranz abruptly turned and fled. Kiram, who remained close to Cyan, asked about the man. Cyan explained that it was Kranz, his half-brother, and dismissed the encounter. Kiram chuckled, remarking that Cyan seemed nothing like his family, though Cyan denied it and stated that he was not far removed from Ellis. Inwardly, Cyan knew the true opposite was someone else entirely. As he entered the family hall, Cyan noticed the servants lined up in perfect rows, welcoming him respectfully. This reaction caught him by surprise. In the past, they never paid him much attention, yet now they acted as though his father or another family member of higher standing was present. He realized much had changed during the past year and considered it a quiet reward for his struggles. Approaching his room, Cyan suddenly sensed a chilling aura. He recognized it immediately, the kind of oppressive presence that forced his body to stiffen. As he opened the door, his suspicion was confirmed. Inside stood Ekel, his older brother, grinning with an expression Cyan despised. Ekel greeted him as if nothing was unusual. Cyan reminded himself to remain calm, though his heart burned with rage. Seeing his expression, Ekel asked if Cyan remembered him, noting that their last encounter was before he left for the academy. To Cyan, Ekel's face seemed demonic. His blood boiled with one overwhelming desire, to kill. He unsheathed his demonic sword in a fit of fury, but Kiram appeared beside him, urging him to restrain himself. She warned that killing Ekel now would serve no purpose. Cyan clenched his jaw, suppressing his anger, and instead bowed formally. He acknowledged Ekel as his older brother, hiding the storm raging inside him. Ekel seemed amused and even patted Cyan's head, which only fueled Cyan's loathing. He expressed relief that Cyan had not forgotten him and commented on Cyan's growing skills, suggesting he would soon be useful on the battlefield. Cyan answered with a forced calmness, claiming to look forward to that day. Ekel grew momentarily doubtful of his tone, yet smiled again, remarking that his visit was worth it. Meanwhile, Emily struggled down the corridor, burdened with 2 heavy suitcases. She complained about Cyan's lack of help and collapsed near her room, exhausted. When she opened the door, she intended to scold Cyan, but upon seeing Ekel, her words froze. Ekel appeared friendly and assured her to continue her work without concern. After he left, Emily exhaled nervously and scolded Cyan for not warning her of his presence. Cyan, unsettled, told her coldly to leave him alone. When she hesitated, his sharp gaze silenced her, and she obeyed, shaken by his sudden anger. Once alone, Cyan retreated to the bathroom, where he vomited, his body releasing the turmoil within. Though slightly relieved, he confronted Kiram, asking why she stopped him earlier. Kiram responded smugly, claiming that she only wished for his hatred to grow, as it would make him stronger. Realizing her intent, Cyan gave a bitter laugh, acknowledging her twisted nature. Elsewhere, Ekel met with his servant, who reported that the second young lady had been located in the north, within the territory of the White Elves of Pruina. Ekel reflected on the elves' disdain for outsiders, yet admitted that she was skilled at handling people. He instructed his servant to monitor her movements. The servant then noted that Ekel seemed brighter than usual, perhaps amused by meeting his younger brother. Ekkel paused before replying. His expression darkened as he confessed that he was in a foul mood. The servant quickly apologized. Alone in thought, Ekkel recalled the look in Cyan's eyes, which had pierced him like those of a sworn enemy. He wondered whether he was imagining things or if there truly was something dangerous hidden behind Cyan's calm facade. For now, he resolved to keep a close watch on his younger brother. As twilight descended, Ekkel sat in silence, replaying the brief encounter in his mind. The unsettling thought lingered, whispering within him. What exactly was Cyan concealing? The carriage waited outside the mansion, and Emily stood nearby with a displeased expression. She looked at Cyan with clear disappointment, telling him how let down she felt. Cyan attempted to explain himself, insisting that he could only take a night escort to the academy. Emily grew angrier and reproached him, saying he should have at least informed her in advance. Their exchange carried the tone of a quarrel, yet there was no more time to argue. Cyan had to leave. He waved farewell, telling Emily to behave in his absence. She appeared indifferent but replied for him to take care of himself. With a mischievous smile, Cyan chuckled and signaled for the carriage to move. Emily questioned if he was truly leaving, her eyes filling with tears as she urged him not to let himself be discouraged even if others bullied him. As the carriage rolled forward, Emily remained behind, raising her hand as if to remind him to be cautious. Cyan felt embarrassed but recognized that her words matched her character well. Memories resurfaced of when he had been 8 years old and bedridden with fever during a heavy storm. He had drifted in and out of consciousness with no one around to care for him. The one who had lifted him onto her back and ran desperately through the rain to find help was Emily. She had knocked on countless doors until a kind old man had finally taken them in. Lying weak on the sickbed, Cyan had realized that without Emily's determination, he might have been left to die alone in the mansion. Returning to the present, he understood that their bond, though veiled in quarrels, resembled that of a family. From the moving carriage, Cyan teased her in his own way, remarking that she should behave or risk trouble at his hands. Emily, delighted to hear his playful tone, feigned ignorance and pretended not to hear. To Cyan, she was more than a servant. Once the farewell ended, Cyan sat quietly inside the carriage. His gaze grew thoughtful as he considered his situation. He noted that 6 intermediate-class knights had been assigned to escort him. To him, this seemed excessive for one person, and the implication made him suspect impending conflict even before reaching the academy. The journey continued until the sun began to sink, and the carriage slowed to a halt. Cyan observed 2 knights signaling to one another, clearly plotting something. One knight approached him with a suggestion that they should camp there for the night. Curious, Cyan asked about their location. The knight claimed they were near the central city of Sephirin and would arrive by morning. Cyan agreed outwardly and instructed him to continue preparations. Yet he already knew the knight had lied. He understood that the area bore no resemblance to the surroundings near Sephirin. They were in the middle of nowhere, and the intentions of the escort had become clear. When the knights requested him to step out of the carriage, Cyan complied, pretending not to notice their betrayal. He commented on the refreshing air, feigning innocence. At once, the knights encircled him, and he noticed a man in a brown cloak among them. Cyan calmly demanded to know who the stranger was. The knights grew uneasy, and silence spread among them until one smirked and drew his sword. He declared that Cyan did not need to know, for death awaited him. Another knight expressed regret, claiming there was nothing personal in the matter and promising a quick end if Cyan simply closed his eyes. With sinister intent, the smirking knight lunged at Cyan, but in an instant, his body was severed and fell lifeless to the ground. Cyan's aura shifted into something chilling. He brandished his sword and demanded again to know who was responsible. The surviving knights froze in terror. He taunted them for their hesitation, questioning if they had not expected such an outcome. One knight, gathering courage, rushed forward in desperation, only to meet the same fate as his head was cut away. Cyan unleashed a relentless assault, each strike precise and merciless. Cries of pain filled the air as he cut through his attackers. One knight attempted to flee, but Cyan ended him with swift efficiency. The man in the brown cloak was left trembling, unable to believe what he had witnessed from one so young. He could only weep in terror, realizing that Cyan was no ordinary child. Cyan advanced, forcing the man to fall backward in fear. Demanding a confession, he compelled the man to reveal the mastermind. The man immediately named Mrs. Margaret as the one behind the plot. Cyan considered the answer disappointingly simple. The man sobbed and begged for his life, while Cyan entered the carriage, forcing him to drive. Along the way, the man explained that young Master Kranz had requested the favor from Mrs. Margaret, which had led to the ambush. Cyan recalled how Kranz had fled from him before and decided that their next meeting would be different. The terrified man asked whether he too would be killed. Cyan dismissed his worries, remarking that he had some value since he could at least drive the carriage. Grateful and surprised, the man thanked him. As the carriage approached its destination, Cyan looked ahead and announced their arrival at Central City, Sufferen. The shattered vase on the floor marked the tension in the room, and Margaret's voice rose sharply as she demanded an explanation. Her butler, lowering his head, revealed that one knight was missing while the other 6 had been found dead. He continued with hesitation, explaining that young Master Cyan had left Sufferen 10 days ago. Margaret's expression twisted into disbelief as she recalled being assured that there would be no complications. Anger and fear gripped her as she accused the butler of incompetence, questioning how they could fail to eliminate a single child. The butler, trembling under her rage, cautiously suggested that there might be a hidden influence supporting Cyan. He requested another chance to send someone after him to the academy. Margaret, however, silenced him immediately, her voice carrying both panic and unease. She warned that any further interference could provoke a disaster, especially if Cyan retaliated against Kranz. The memory of Cyan's cold eyes and unsettling threats from the past resurfaced in her mind, making her heart race. She finally turned away, commanding her butler to abandon any plans and ensure secrecy. He obeyed, retreating from the room, unaware that his movements had been observed by one of Ekil's servants. Meanwhile, Cyan reclined comfortably inside a carriage, his eyes half closed in thought. It had been 10 days since leaving Sufferen, and during this journey, Brian had continued playing the role of his subordinate. Cyan assumed that word of his survival had already spread, which meant his enemies would grow restless. He silently contemplated what to do with Brian once they arrived at the academy. His thoughts were interrupted when Brian opened the carriage window and announced their arrival. As the gates of the Royal Academy loomed ahead, Cyan stirred, his mind filled with memories of his previous life there. The recollections were far from pleasant, yet he acknowledged how much the place had shaped him. At the reception desk, he presented the crest of House Vert and identified himself as Cyan Vert, son of Duke Vert. The staff member froze upon hearing his name before regaining composure and smiling politely. She confirmed his registration and instructed him to wait in his assigned dormitory until the entrance ceremony and elemental test in 2 days. To his surprise, Cyan was informed he had been granted a private room. Suspicious, he questioned whether a mistake had been made. The staff member remained silent, merely handing him a tray containing his key, letter, and belongings. With Brian carrying the luggage, they proceeded to their quarters. The moment Brian entered the room, he froze in shock at its opulent interior, dropping everything in disbelief. Cyan calmly surveyed the surroundings, realizing the room was located in the Royal Hall, an honor no member of his family had ever received. This left him certain that someone powerful was manipulating matters behind the scenes. Cyan confirmed the luggage with Brian before announcing that his role had ended. Brian paled instantly, assuming Cyan would dispose of him. Instead, Cyan tossed him a heavy bag of gold coins, remarking that it would be enough for him to start a new life elsewhere. Brian stood frozen, overwhelmed by the gesture, until he suddenly fell to one knee and pledged his life to Cyan. He revealed his true identity as Brian Kendrick, a knight of Velias. Though ranked at the bottom, he had been raised with the belief that when he found someone worthy, he must swear loyalty without hesitation. Cyan regarded him with a piercing gaze, warning that betrayal would never be tolerated. Brian, trembling yet firm, answered that he did not care even if Cyan turned against him in the future. Amused by his resolve, Cyan accepted his loyalty and moved on, declaring his intention to skip the entrance ceremony and head straight for the elemental test. Elsewhere, in the Royal Academy Dean's office, Kundal Kusal reviewed the reports of new students. He noted the remarkable abilities of Princess Erin Sevelis and Seth Shaharkin, both showing promising elemental purity. However, the record of Cyan Vert stood out most. Despite possessing only a 1-star mana control ability, he displayed S-ranked physical strength and a staggering 92% purity in the dark attribute. Instructor Sirika Nikiti, standing beside him, expressed shock, comparing Cyan's results to those of Ellis, once hailed as the child of God, who had only achieved 88% in water attribute purity. The dean explained that Cyan had been assigned to the Royal Hall under imperial orders. He revealed that Cyan had saved the young princess during a frontline battle, and rumors suggested the emperor was considering marrying her to him. Sirika immediately foresaw turmoil, as such a union would likely intensify conflicts over succession, possibly pushing the empire toward civil war. The dean dismissed speculation, remarking that only time would reveal whether Cyan became a savior or a destroyer of the empire. Meanwhile, after completing his test, Cyan wandered the academy halls, reflecting on his 92% purity in darkness. He considered whether it had been enhanced by consuming demonic beast blood in his past life. His musings were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Kranz, who recoiled in visible fear. Cyan silently acknowledged his brother's shock at seeing someone he believed dead. Beside Kranz stood Popper Fenelon, the arrogant son of Marquis Fenelon, notorious for bullying Cyan alongside Kranz in the past. Popper mocked Cyan, insulting his origins and provoking old memories of humiliation. A wicked smile spread across Cyan's face as he recognized the opportunity before him. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, kicking Popper violently into the wall, the impact cracking the stone. Kranz cried out in horror at the sight of his friend's broken form, his fear of Cyan intensifying with every passing second. After receiving Cyan's kick, Popper collapsed unconscious on the floor. Cyan then shifted his attention to Kranz, his older brother. Kranz trembled in fear, barely able to stammer apologies as Cyan approached him. With a cold expression, Cyan placed a firm hand on Kranz's shoulder, forcing beads of sweat to roll down his face until he looked on the verge of tears. Leaning close, Cyan spoke in a low voice. He explained that he did not care about what Kranz did behind his back, since he was lenient enough to let such things pass. However, he warned that if their paths crossed again, Kranz would leave the academy in a wheelchair. Terrified beyond words, Kranz was left shaking as Cyan released him and walked away. The moment Cyan disappeared, Kranz collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by dread. A faint smile curved Cyan's lips as he left, finding amusement in the situation. To him, the academy was proving to be far more entertaining than he had expected. Meanwhile, inside the Royal Academy library, Sirika, one of the instructors, moved silently between the shelves. Her thoughts lingered on Cyan, wondering if he was destined to become a hero or if he would fall into ruin. She resolved to keep a close watch on him. Reaching the spot where her desired book should have been, she discovered it missing. Confused, she pondered its disappearance until a voice suddenly interrupted her. Cyan stood behind her, casually holding the very book she sought. Startled, Sirika forced a polite smile, questioning how a student had entered a restricted area. Her calm exterior hid her alarm, for she had failed to detect his presence. She addressed him directly, confirming his name and requesting the book for her research. Cyan appeared friendly as he handed her what seemed to be a letter. Sirika reached to thank him, but a sudden slash cut through the book in her hands, exposing the letter concealed within. Cyan looked at her with sharp eyes and remarked that this was what she had been searching for. His tone hardened as he addressed her, no longer as an instructor but as the leader of the assassin organization known as Mist. Sirika's eyes grew cold as she held the exposed letter and demanded to know how he had uncovered her identity. Cyan reflected inwardly on his past life. At first, Sirika had seemed unremarkable, presenting herself as friendly and concerned about his growth. She had even encouraged him when others belittled him, yet he now realized those gestures had been nothing but deception. Behind her innocent facade lay the leader of an organization hiding within the very academy that trained the continent's nobles. Sirika composed herself quickly and invited Cyan to her private laboratory to continue their discussion. Surprised by her measured response, Cyan followed her, curious about her next move. Inside the lab, he noted that nothing had changed since his previous life. Surrounded by peculiar items, he sat calmly and sipped the tea she offered, then smiled as he announced that she had poisoned it. Amused, Sirika admitted that the poison was mild, claiming it would merely melt his organs. Cyan, however, remained unfazed, silently remarking that nothing so trivial could affect him, not after consuming demonic beast's blood and surviving Emily's cooking. He then advised her to use something stronger next time. Dropping her pretense, Sirika demanded to know how he had discovered her identity and the hidden location of her orders within the library. She wondered if he was implying that he was also a member of Mist. Cyan calmly questioned what more proof she required. His composure unsettled her, and she scoffed that he must have grown arrogant after receiving high marks in his elemental test. Cyan ignored the remark and pressed on, asking about the ongoing assassinations, which he referred to as the Purification Project. Sirika denied knowledge, though her hostility betrayed her. She warned that he might regret his words. Cyan challenged her directly, asking if she was truly threatening a student. In response, Sirika flipped the table between them, obstructing his view and launching into combat. Cyan broke through the table with a single punch, meeting her assault head-on. Sirika, moving with the precision of an assassin, clung to the ceiling with two daggers in hand, ready to strike. Cyan reminded her that he had already proven himself, yet she lunged forward with lightning-fast attacks. He narrowly evaded, forcing her to admit her intent to kill him. With growing irritation, Cyan drew the demonic sword Kirim, declaring that he had no choice but to fight seriously. His strikes came swiftly from multiple angles, forcing Sirika into a defensive stance. Overwhelmed, she eventually called for the fight to stop, her gaze fixed on the blade in his hand. Recognition flickered across her features as she questioned whether it was truly Kirim, the weapon said to be wielded only by the one chosen by air. Cyan confirmed her suspicion, his expression cold. He declared that the successor Mist sought was standing before her. Sirika, bewildered, asked how he could know such information. Cyan replied with certainty that the person she had been searching for was none other than himself. With that, he demanded that she take him to air. The scene shifted to the streets of Ruin, where darkness covered the area and only a thin beam of moonlight illuminated the path. Sirika led Cyan forward, using magic to open a hidden door. As the entrance gave way, a gloomy mist poured out from within, spreading into the night. Sirika informed Cyan that this was a base of mist and that beyond this entrance lay the path to the altar he sought. She explained that from this point onward, he was on his own. With that, she turned away, leaving Cyan to face the darkened realm alone. Cyan stepped forward and immediately sensed the nature of the place. It was not an ordinary chamber but a special domain shaped by the power of the god of mist, far larger inside than its exterior suggested. His sharp perception alerted him to the presence of hidden enemies. He quietly noted their positions, recognizing 2 assassins at his right and 3 more on his left. Without delay, daggers flew toward him from the shadows. Cyan reacted calmly, anticipating the attack and deflecting every blade. Yet he quickly realized the assault was meant to divert him, for 2 masked assassins rushed from behind with blinding speed. Their movement flashed like streaks of red, their precision betraying refined skill. Cyan retreated slightly, dodging their rapid strikes while countering with returned daggers. One projectile nearly struck an assassin in the face, yet the masked opponent managed to deflect even at close range, confirming their remarkable technique. Soon all 5 assassins revealed themselves, surrounding Cyan with their secret formation. They activated the expansion technique followed by the dreaded Deathhorn formation, which attacked from 4 angles at once. Cyan appeared cornered, yet he showed no fear. He had already analyzed their methods. Drawing on his knowledge, he released his own expansion technique. A red aura burst from his body, enveloping him in a menacing glow. The assassins froze in shock, recognizing their own secret skill mirrored by the very target they pursued. Their disbelief grew stronger as Cyan unleashed the Bloodthirst Wave, a manifestation of murderous intent that transformed into physical force. The crimson aura surged outward like a crushing tide, pressing upon the assassins and constricting their chests. One after another, they collapsed unconscious under its weight, gasping in vain. Cyan surveyed the aftermath and confirmed they would remain incapacitated for some time. His eyes then turned to the final assassin, who had yet to engage. This figure had been watching silently, unmoved by the fall of his comrades. Cyan studied him carefully, suspecting he was a higher-ranked adversary. To preempt any danger, Cyan prepared the Mist Sword technique, focusing power into the demonic blade Kirim. Before the strike could be executed, the last assassin closed the distance with astonishing speed. The clash forced Cyan backward, surprising him with the sheer strength behind the attack. As the mask fell from the opponent's face, Cyan realized the truth. The assassin was none other than Sirika herself. His astonishment deepened when Sirika, now revealed, smiled with unsettling delight and demanded to witness his full power. In response, Cyan unleashed the 8th form of Thick Mist Assault. 8 rapid slashes struck in a single heartbeat, pushing Sirika backward. The force sliced through the ribbon holding her hair, releasing her long dark strands that framed her face. Instead of alarm, she radiated exhilaration. She praised Cyan's mastery of the Mist Sword, her obsession with his abilities growing more evident. Cyan, however, broke away, unwilling to prolong the clash. Sirika pursued relentlessly, invoking zeal for combat, a skill that heightened her bloodlust. Her movements blurred as she phased through walls, her eyes shining with madness as she hunted Cyan. Her voice echoed with twisted desire, demanding he face her. She unleashed rushing miststorm, sealing all escape routes with a storm of slashes. Cyan was forced to defend, acknowledging her overwhelming aggression. Sirika reminded him that this realm was created by air, meaning no energy signatures would leak outside. Realizing he could fight without restraint, Cyan resolved to unleash his full strength. His body was soon engulfed by a red aura as his eyes turned crimson, signifying his fusion with Kirim. Yet at the height of this transformation, his body froze and he collapsed face first to the ground, unconscious. Sirika halted, confused by his sudden collapse. At that moment, a voice echoed, filled with authority. Kirim's form materialized from the swirling dark energy. The demonic sword chastised Sirika, demanding an explanation for her assault on the rightful successor. Shocked, Sirika immediately recognized Kirim and knelt in respect. She attempted to justify her actions, claiming she only wished to confirm Cyan's identity. Kiram was furious. She accused Sirika of recklessness, insisting she could have summoned air instead of endangering Cyan's life. Power surged from her presence, forcing Sirika into silence. Yet Sirika shifted the focus back, reminding Kiram that Cyan lay bleeding from the reckless manifestation. The demonic sword noticed his weakening state and questioned his condition with concern. Sirika explained that Kiram's full manifestation consumed vast amounts of Cyan's life force. Kiram raged, scolding Cyan for carelessness and demanding why all the blood of beasts he had consumed had not prepared him for this burden. Sirika, however, maintained her warrior's pride. As Hall Master of Mist, she declared she would never refuse a fight, especially against such an opponent. Kiram found her bloodlust unnerving, though Cyan began to stir back to consciousness. He ordered Kiram to release him, which she did reluctantly. Though drained, Cyan insisted on standing his ground. Kiram promised to shield him and teach Sirika a lesson. Sirika, exhilarated, prepared for combat again. Before the clash could resume, a whisper came from beyond. The voice of air commanded Sirika to stop. A glowing portal of blue light appeared, its energy radiating across the chamber. From within came the divine order that Sirika was to guide the successor to the altar. Respectfully, Sirika obeyed. Cyan, relieved, steadied himself and acknowledged the moment with determination. The time had finally come for him to meet Air, the god of darkness. Inside Cyan's mind, fragments of old memories stirred once again. He remembered how people described the god of black mist as an evil being. They claimed this god killed without hesitation and excused it as an act of compassion. The god's reply was always that it was what others desired. Cyan reflected that others had no right to decide what was right or wrong for someone else. If a person could protect their own ethics even at the cost of death, then that was enough. To many, such logic sounded like madness. Cyan, however, thought that this god simply wished to protect the weak, though in his heart he also found the god rather foolish. Returning to the present, Cyan advanced alongside Kiram, stepping through the azure spatial door granted by Air's permission. Before them stretched an endless staircase leading upward into brilliance. At the top rested a golden throne, and upon it sat a man cloaked like an assassin with a hood covering his face. His voice resounded across the chamber as he asked Cyan if he knew who he was. Calmly, Cyan acknowledged that he faced Air, the god of black mist. Air questioned whether Cyan was truly the one named Cyan Vert, remarking he had never seen him before. He demanded evidence of his claim as successor. Cyan answered firmly that Air could already sense the power of the mist within him. This reply silenced further doubt, and Air shifted to explanation. There were two possible paths to becoming a successor. One occurred when the god himself bestowed the mist stone. The other occurred when the stone chose the worthy one on its own. Air admitted he did not know Cyan, which meant the latter applied. He revealed that the mist stone had disappeared from the altar the previous year. He added that it was remarkable Cyan had also awakened Kiram, something even Air had failed to achieve. He noted Cyan's skill in managing her presence. Kiram, appearing in her small demonic form, frowned in displeasure, silently resenting the notion that she was being handled by anyone. Air's gaze sharpened as he observed Cyan's eyes, declaring that the light in them surpassed his apparent age. He further revealed that Cyan came from a timeline different from his own. Cyan wondered silently if Air had been responsible for bringing him here. Air denied such involvement, explaining that if Cyan sought an all-powerful god, he was mistaken. Air confessed his divine rights had long been stripped from him. Hearing this, Cyan conceded that he should not have expected much, though he found this convenient for his own purposes. Air's expression shifted into excitement. A perfect successor had arrived on his own, requiring no effort from him. Cyan recognized the laziness in his demeanor. Kiram, watching their relaxed exchange, felt both confusion and unease. Air's mood darkened as he remarked that Cyan had brought something troublesome. He wondered if Cyan was not satisfied with the demonic sword and now aimed to claim the holy sword's power as well. Cyan smirked, producing a broken shard of the holy sword's blade. He said he simply thought hiding its existence might render it useless to the world. Air laughed lightly, calling it a wicked hobby, but decided not to interfere. He stepped closer, radiating an overwhelming aura. With chilling authority, he asked Cyan what he intended to do with such power. Cyan concentrated as memories of his brother surfaced. In his past life, when asked the same question, his answer had been that he would live for his brother. Now he mocked his former self, calling that response idiotic. Air reminded him that blind faith was the most dangerous thing. Cyan resolved to answer differently this time. He declared he had no divine cause or noble dream, only the intent to use this power for himself. Air studied him carefully and asked if he could live with such consequences. Cyan remained unwavering, stating he would not obey anyone and would walk his own path regardless of outcome. Air speculated that Cyan still harbored a hidden plan, though Cyan denied any disclosure. Accepting his answer, Air only asked that Cyan purify his name. He dismissed him as boring and ended his questioning. Kiram suddenly attacked, rushing at Air in her demonic form. Air dodged with ease and called her his daughter. Enraged, Kiram demanded he stop speaking nonsense. Air responded with warmth, saying he was happy to see her like this. Kiram recoiled, growing more uncomfortable. Cyan dryly observed their strange interaction, likening it to an odd father-daughter relationship. Magical circles formed around Kiram, returning her to her original body. Confused, she realized it had not consumed Cyan's mana. Air admitted he had given her some of his own life force. Kiram raged at him, accusing him of indecent intent, while Air remained calm. Watching them, Cyan concluded their bond was truly like that of father and daughter. The next morning in the dormitory, Cyan appeared unsettled. Brian asked his master what was happening. Cyan replied he did not know and told him to leave it be. Brian felt uneasy and whispered that this was not something he could ignore. Before them stood Kiram and Sirika, exchanging sharp glares. Kiram accused Sirika of showing undue interest in Cyan. Sirika countered that her presence was only to guide him as a disciple. Their dispute grew heated as each declared their claim. Cyan, unable to tolerate the tension, announced he would take a walk. Brian panicked, begging not to be left with them. Outside, Cyan climbed to a high spot, admiring the city bathed in sunlight. Yet his senses detected the scent of blood from a nearby alley. He hurried to find a student beaten and mocked by 3 others. They kicked him down and prepared to force an energy sphere into his mouth. At the final moment, Erin appeared, her voice stern as she confronted the aggressors. She revealed her identity as Erin Sevelis, princess of the Wusif Empire, and challenged their cruelty. When Barrett learned that Erin was a princess, he showed no hesitation. Instead of respect, he greeted her with a condescending tone, remarking that she was merely the 5th princess of the Wusif Empire. He rose from his seat, leaned forward with disdain, and pretended it was an honor to meet her. Erin, uncomfortable with his false civility, refused to shake his hand and demanded an explanation for what she had witnessed. Barrett smirked and acted as if she misunderstood. He pointed to a student and dragged him forward, forcing him to answer whether bullying was taking place. Under fear, the student denied the accusation and claimed they were only playing. Erin tried to encourage honesty, but the boy begged her to leave. Satisfied, Barrett mocked Erin, showing no concern for the truth. Erin, unwilling to accept the situation, declared her intent to take the student away. Barrett immediately seized her arm tightly and threatened her, telling her that she had not understood his warning. Erin questioned his meaning, and Barrett growled that Risamus had already told her to leave. Erin warned him to release her or face consequences, but Barrett sneered and called her weak. Before his insult finished, Cyan appeared suddenly, kicking Barrett and sending him sprawling to the ground. Relief washed over Erin as Cyan arrived, though his gaze shifted to the pink-haired girl in the group. He recognized her as Risamus. Memories resurfaced, recalling a rooftop battle with her in his past life. At that time, Risamus displayed ferocious skill as a swordswoman, attacking with relentless precision. Cyan had defended cautiously, recognizing her as the continent's best swordsman. He knew she originated from the Wusif Empire but had later abandoned it, entering the Count Klein household of Garum Kingdom and even changing nationality. He remembered the fierce clash of red and blue sword auras as they exchanged blows. Risamus had once launched a vertical strike that split the ground, leaping above him to swing from overhead. Yet she had struck only his cloak. Cyan had reappeared above her, plunging Kiram's blade into her back and pinning her to the ground. Blood spilled as her sword fell, her body broken. At the time, Cyan admitted he had been ordered to assassinate her, but he could not treat her like a target in the shadows. He had chosen to face her openly in combat. Returning to the present, Cyan felt conflicted seeing Risamus again, now a timid academy student intimidated by him. The students around Barrett rushed to his side, but Barrett rose in anger and dismissed their concern. Fixing Cyan with a sharp look, Barrett recognized him as Cyan Vert, known for returning from the front lines. Barrett suggested Cyan join their game. Cyan regarded the so-called game as reckless, pointing out that misusing a mana marble could destroy one's body. He observed Barrett's group and declared he would participate. A purple sphere of shadow formed in Cyan's hand, growing until it expanded above them like a threatening cloud. Barrett, horrified, could not speak as Cyan demanded he open his mouth to continue the game he had started. The outcome of this confrontation remained unspoken, but later Risamus lay in the infirmary with bandaged wounds. Erin and Cyan stood nearby. Erin assured Risamus that external injuries were healed, though rest was necessary for the internal damage. Risamus expressed gratitude, but Eren boasted proudly that Cyan's intervention had scattered their enemies. Cyan, however, studied Risamus with a heavy expression, noting her fractured body and concussion. Risamus hesitated before asking if Cyan knew her, since his eyes had lingered on her. Cyan coldly denied familiarity, apologizing if it had caused discomfort. Embarrassed, Risamus lowered her head. She admitted that she stayed in Commoner Hall, explaining that an instructor had promised financial aid but had been dismissed, leaving her without support. Eren, shocked to learn she was a commoner, pitied her. Cyan summarized bluntly that without backing, she might have to leave the academy. Eren sympathized and worried about her being bullied again. Cyan then suggested that Eren take Risamus as her own companion, while also learning swordsmanship from her. Eren looked at Risamus with confusion, believing she was a boy. Cyan corrected her, stating Risamus was a girl. Eren froze in disbelief, while Risamus admitted she preferred short hair and boyish clothes for comfort, leading to constant misunderstanding. Eren apologized for her ignorance, feeling she had failed in her role as a woman, while Risamus insisted she should not blame herself. Eren eventually proposed that Risamus stay under her protection, reasoning that she disliked loneliness and also bore responsibility as a princess. Risamus, touched, promised to become someone Eren could be proud of. Eren responded warmly, but Cyan had already departed unnoticed. Outside the infirmary, Cyan reflected alone. He believed he had done enough and trusted Eren to care for Risamus. His mind shifted to the reason Risamus had abandoned the Wusif Empire. She would not have lost her mana if not for Barrett's actions. Now the continent's strongest fencer stood before him, no longer weakened. Defeating her in the future would be difficult, even for him. Cyan then focused on a joyful matter. In his hand he held a mission order received from Sirika that morning. It was his first purification mission as a mist, marking the beginning of his next path. Cyan held a task card given by Sirika. The card contained strange characters, written in a language not common, and their meaning was unclear. He studied it silently, realizing that his first mission already appeared difficult. Recalling Sirika's trust in him, he sighed at the challenge ahead. As he walked through the hallway, his thoughts grew heavier, believing that the path would only become harder if she continued to push him this way. His attention was suddenly drawn to the crumbling hallway steps. Dust and fragments fell everywhere as something approached. Instinctively, he shielded his face and prepared himself. At first, he assumed a demonic beast had entered the academy, yet what appeared was not a monster but a towering man with eyes glowing red like a beast. The stranger fixed his gaze on Cyan and confirmed his identity. Cyan, startled, wondered how this enormous figure knew him. The man introduced himself as Seth Shaharkin, claiming to be a new student as well. His words confused Cyan, who silently questioned how such a massive man could be only 11 years old. He recalled nothing of such a figure from his past life. Seth flexed his muscles proudly, recalling feats he had heard of Cyan. He spoke of Cyan's survival against beasts and even the dragon attack, admiring that Cyan had received rank S for physique, while he himself had not. Then Seth challenged him to fight immediately. As Cyan looked closely, he noticed the symbol on Seth's chest and recognized the mark of Spania. Memories returned of the desert kingdom located east of the continent. Known for its formidable military, Spania had been a challenge even for the Wusif Empire. The nation fell into ruin after the sudden death of its sole successor, whose excessive devotion to muscle training weakened his health. Cyan silently acknowledged the irony of meeting him in this life. Seth pressed further, demanding to fight immediately and refusing to accept refusal. Cyan remained calm and reminded him that unpermitted duels were forbidden in the academy, requiring official requests at the administration office. Surprised yet obedient, Seth asked for directions. Cyan pointed him to the third floor of the main building. Seth charged away, eager, though in the wrong direction. Watching him run, Cyan thought to himself that rumors about Seth's brain being made of muscle were true. Certain he would not see him for a while, Cyan refocused on the purification mission. Meanwhile in the city, at the slave market, a scarred man approached Zickerman Albaz. He informed him that preparations were complete. Zickerman, known publicly as a philanthropist, secretly ran the illegal trade, even selling crossbreeds. He ordered his men to proceed, boasting that today would unveil his greatest masterpiece. Cyan observed the market from the shadows, identifying his target. Kiram, his sword, warned of strange energy surrounding Zickerman. Cyan remained cautious, realizing the man concealed something. At the cages, Zickerman laughed to himself, but his confidence was shattered when a red mist appeared. A flash of light struck, killing one of his men instantly. Fear overcame him as he collapsed to the ground. His guards shouted into the darkness, demanding the attacker reveal themselves. Cyan advanced, sword in hand, and eliminated the guard with swift precision. His cuts crippled the man before finishing him with a strike across the throat. Zickerman trembled, horrified by the speed and efficiency. As Cyan approached, Zickerman begged for money to buy his life. Cyan ignored the plea and cut off his arm, leaving him writhing. Cyan then delivered judgment, declaring Zickerman guilty of inhumane experiments, slave trading, and crossbreeding. He reminded him that his death was deserved and offered no time for repentance. Zickerman shouted back in rage, refusing to accept the verdict. Cyan calmly informed him that his chance was gone, then unleashed his 8th assassination technique, Wild Strike. The relentless barrage ended Zickerman's life in agony. With the mission complete, Cyan murmured that purification had been finished. He searched further and followed Kiram's senses toward a prison room. Cutting through the bars, he discovered a girl lying motionless. At first, he assumed she was already dead, but Kiram pointed out what she clutched in her hands. It was a dragon egg. Cyan retrieved the egg and later returned to his dormitory. He placed it carefully on a cushion, noting its light purple glow. Brian entered and froze at the sight of the egg, unable to believe his eyes. He asked where Cyan had obtained such a thing. Cyan responded casually, claiming he had simply found it while walking. Brian, shocked by the answer, pressed him further, asking who would ever pick up something like that. Cyan maintained his serious tone, insisting he spoke the truth. Brian trembled as he realized it was indeed a dragon egg and asked what would happen if it hatched. Cyan reassured him that separated eggs often never hatched, explaining that without the right mana, they were little more than stones. However, before he could finish, a cracking sound filled the room. Both Cyan and Brian froze, their eyes fixed on the egg as cracks spread across its surface. The prophecy Brian had feared unfolded before them. The dragon egg began to hatch. A purple light burst from within the egg, signaling the imminent birth of a dragon hatchling. Cyan remained still, watching as the glow intensified while the shell cracked faster. The entire egg shattered, revealing a baby dragon that radiated both innocence and power. Brian held his head in disbelief as he realized what had just happened. Cyan, unable to speak, stared at the surreal sight. The creature looked adorable, yet the aura surrounding it was terrifying. In his mind, Cyan assessed that the child was not a pure dragon nor a human. It was a dragonkin, a hybrid between the two races, and this discovery troubled him. The baby dragon, noticing Cyan's gaze, suddenly sparkled with life. She opened her mouth for the first time and called him Papa. Without hesitation, she jumped into his lap and embraced him with affection. Cyan froze, stunned at the creature's instinct to claim him as her parent. Kiram materialized beside them, observing the scene with amusement. She mocked him, congratulating him for becoming an 11-year-old father. Cyan clenched his jaw in irritation, silently blaming her for everything. He recalled when Kiram had handed him the egg. At that time, he warned her that it was dangerous for such a relic to fall into the wrong hands. She dismissed his concerns, saying that eggs without mothers never hatched, considering it nothing more than a dangerous stone. That memory only deepened his frustration now. Kiram laughed freely, still teasing him. Cyan's patience snapped, and he released a frightening aura that filled the room with pressure. He reminded her of her words, demanding why she insisted it would never happen. She defended herself by claiming she never expected such an outcome. Cyan, however, understood the truth. The child's existence alone posed immense risk. The baby dragon fell asleep in Cyan's arms, breathing peacefully. Despite her calm, Cyan felt no comfort. His thoughts raced, acknowledging the threat she represented. A hybrid of dragon and human was unlike any other crossbreed. The Academy would see her as a danger. Even worse, dragons were known for their obsession with bloodlines. If they discovered her existence, they would destroy anyone connected to her. Cyan's mind darkened as he stared at her sleeping face. The possibility of ending her life now crossed him. His hand moved slightly, almost reaching for her neck. Kiram stood silently, understanding his thoughts, and considered it reasonable. She agreed without speaking that such a fate might be kinder. Cyan hesitated, burdened with the decision. At that moment, the baby dragon's eyes opened. She gazed at Cyan with innocence and repeated the word Papa. She nestled deeper into his arms and confessed her affection in a childlike manner. Cyan froze, overwhelmed by the sudden warmth flowing from her small body. The unfamiliar sensation pierced the walls of hatred inside him. For the first time in years, his cold heart softened. He lifted her gently and studied her smiling face. That moment shattered his resolve to kill her. Cyan concluded that raising her was the only choice. He told Kiram that things would work out somehow and declared his decision. Kiram, surprised to see his expression filled with warmth, remained speechless, doubting whether he truly intended to raise the hybrid as his own. Far away in Vert Castle, Lady Kranz's mother paced restlessly. She muttered Cyan's name with contempt, fearing what his existence meant for her daughter. Panic clouded her thoughts until Ekal appeared, addressing her as mother. Startled, she tried to dismiss her anxiety. Ekal offered comfort with a gentle demeanor, but his true intent was hidden. Once the woman departed, his face darkened. He questioned a servant regarding recent movements. The servant reported that 6 knights were found dead in the Valus Mountains, while one had entered Lewin with the youngest son. The involvement of Margaret was suspected. Ekal pressed further, asking about his brother. The servant admitted no progress. Fear gripped him, for Ekal never forgave failure. Desperate, he promised to redeem himself. Ekal feigned kindness, encouraging him, yet commanded him to uncover his brother's secrets. Back at the academy, Sirika hurried through the hallway and entered Cyan's room without warning. She found Cyan and Kiram feeding milk to the baby dragon. Shock covered her face as she demanded an explanation. Cyan tried to deflect, asking her real purpose. Sirika adjusted her glasses and stated that his actions had already caused serious trouble. She produced a sparring approval form. Cyan realized that Seth had indeed found a way to formalize their duel. Sirika scolded Cyan for his recklessness, warning that even the principal would attend. Though Cyan brushed it off as a fight between children, Sirika insisted that Seth was no ordinary opponent. She revealed that the duel would take place in 2 hours. The arena soon filled with spectators. Cyan stood calmly as Seth entered with unrestrained laughter, overjoyed to face him. Seth claimed he had awaited this moment with anticipation. Cyan displayed no emotion, ready to face him. Seth drew his sword and asked whether magic would be used. Cyan agreed to exclude it since Seth refused. The battle began with Seth's fierce attacks. Cyan parried with minimal effort, redirecting each strike with precision rather than force. Seth grew frustrated as his strength failed to overwhelm Cyan's technique. Cyan analyzed his opponent, recognizing that accuracy and timing outweighed brute strength. Seth roared and struck harder, but his blade was deflected again. Driven by desperation, Seth attempted to change tactics. He circled behind Cyan, aiming a low blow while shifting his stance into a kick. Cyan anticipated it, sheathing his blade at the exact moment. He lowered himself, caught Seth's leg, and countered with flawless timing. Using his own strength and Seth's momentum, Cyan swept his remaining leg and launched him forward. Seth's body arced through the air before crashing toward the arena floor. His mind reeled with disbelief, questioning whether Cyan possessed eyes on the back of his head. Seth braced his hands against the floor before impact. The force of the slam cracked the ground beneath him. Sweat ran down his face as he narrowly avoided striking his head. Using his hands as a pivot, he spun, attempting to kick free from Cyan's grip. Cyan released him, amused that Seth managed to counterattack in such a brief moment. Nimble movement from someone of Seth's size was unexpected. The students gasped in disbelief, unable to comprehend what had just unfolded. Whispers filled the arena as Seth sat panting. His laughter soon broke the tension, sounding mocking yet exhilarated. Despite being outmatched, he found excitement in the clash. Though defeated in swordsmanship, his pride as a battle enthusiast refused to surrender. Seth rose, flexing his muscles as magical energy surged from his body, radiating in waves. His determination burned. He vowed to give everything in this fight. Cyan lifted his sword onto his shoulder, a faint smile crossing his face. His eyes reflected indifference as he observed his opponent. Seth stomped the floor, the stone beneath him shattering under his momentum. He unleashed his magical power, his sleeves tearing apart. The arena shook as cracks spread outward from the force. Laughter erupted from Seth as his aura raged. The principal stroked his beard while observing from above. He mused about the boldness of children who dared to use magic in a duel. Sirika, seated nearby, noted that Cyan had already proven superior in swordsmanship. The principal nodded in agreement, stating that such was clear when comparing ranks. Seth's physique was classified as a rank, whereas Cyan's was S rank. Yet physical strength alone was not enough. True danger came from Seth's 3-star mana rank, the highest among the enrolled students. Sirika's gaze darkened. As an assassin, she despised unwanted attention, and Cyan's involvement drew eyes toward her. She cursed silently at his recklessness. Back in the arena, Seth summoned a giant sand fist reinforced with debris. He named the skill Death Fist. The massive construct hurled toward Cyan with crushing force. The strike shattered the ground, leaving a hole where Cyan had stood. Yet Cyan had leapt aside with effortless precision. Seth quickly launched follow-up strikes, controlling the sand fist with relentless intent. Cyan evaded each blow, gliding past destruction as though the attacks meant nothing. Frustration grew in Seth's eyes. He concentrated mana into his left hand and triggered Desert Tooth. Sand columns erupted violently around Cyan, trapping him within a cage. Explosions tore across the arena floor, shaking the protective barrier. Cyan studied the technique, recognizing Seth's potential to manipulate magic above his current rank. He concluded that 4-star spells might not be beyond Seth's reach. Exhaustion weighed on Seth, his breathing heavy from depleting mana. Despite this, he continued to taunt Cyan, demanding why he only dodged. His fury erupted, claiming that a true warrior would face attacks directly. Cyan responded with calm disdain, questioning why he should intentionally take damage. The remark humiliated Seth, who clenched his teeth and funneled mana into his right arm. Streams of energy swirled around him like a storm. His ultimate move gathered power. He unleashed Sandstorm, a raging vortex of destruction that expanded across the arena. The storm consumed everything in its path, pressing against the protective barrier until cracks appeared. The instructors reinforcing it shouted warnings, straining under the pressure. Sirika urged the principal to stop the duel, but the old mage remained composed. He sensed something occurring within the storm. Inside the chaos, Cyan extended his palm. Dark mana gathered, forming the secret technique expansion void sphere. The orb pulsed like a black hole, pulling the sandstorm into its depths. Sirika recognized the technique with dread, unwilling for such power to be revealed publicly. The vortex weakened, consumed entirely by the growing sphere. The principal chuckled with amusement at Cyan's ingenuity, while Sirika seethed with unease. The storm collapsed into silence. Cyan absorbed the sphere into his hand, leaving no trace of Seth's attack. Seth staggered, bewildered by the disappearance of his magic. Confusion spread among the students as whispers rose again. None had ever witnessed such dark sorcery. Cyan remained composed, his presence radiating authority. Seth fell to his knees, conceding defeat. His pride was wounded, yet his spirit burned anew. Rather than despair, he vowed to train harder and challenge Cyan again. Meanwhile, within the dormitory, Brian carefully prepared milk for the young dragon princess. He checked the temperature with precision, recalling his experience raising siblings. Calling her to eat, he froze in shock. The dragonkin had already grown rapidly. She now stood on her own, hair longer and body stronger. The match continued unseen by many, for the sandstorm had obscured the arena moments earlier. The instructors reinforced the failing barrier, voices raised in alarm. Relief only came when Cyan's void sphere consumed the threat. Later, Cyan returned to the dormitory, carrying the dragonkin in his arms. Her growth startled him. She resembled a 6-year-old human child despite only days passing since her hatching. Her hair was tied neatly, her clothes well fitted, and her eyes gleamed with warmth as she welcomed him back. Brian expressed his concerns, admitting that hiding her rapid growth would become impossible. Cyan agreed grimly, aware that secrecy would not last. Kiram slept soundly, unaware of the escalating situation. The room grew tense when Sirika arrived. She leaned against the doorframe, adjusting her glasses with narrowed eyes. Her words struck sharp as she warned Cyan that his recklessness today had drawn too much attention. She reminded him that a demonic sword could be hidden, but a dragonkin could not. Frustration etched across her face as she cursed his carelessness, demanding what he had been thinking. Kiram, still half asleep, stirred faintly as though sensing that he was being spoken of elsewhere. Sirika observed the small dragon and her astonishment deepened at the rapid growth. The creature had expanded in size and presence far too quickly. She muttered to herself that this responsibility fell upon Cyan since he had chosen to bring her back during a mission. Handling something that drew such attention would not remain simple for long. Cyan explained that Brian had been tasked with caring for the dragon. He mentioned that Seth had placed a barrier over the dormitory to conceal both Kiram and the child from detection. Brian looked puzzled as he realized that he was now the caretaker of a child. Sirika handed Cyan a dark red letter, remarking that no further trouble should arise if he acted carefully. Cyan opened the letter and disappointment flashed across his expression. He had expected a reward worthy of his victory, yet it was nothing but a warning. Sirika exited, leaving behind words of caution that Cyan should avoid drawing too much attention. Brian curiously asked about the contents of the letter, prompting Cyan to explain that it was a warning of expulsion for misconduct. Brian was horrified by the revelation and exclaimed at the possibility of being cast out. The young dragon tilted her head with worry and asked if they would be forced to live on the streets. Cyan studied her innocent expression and wondered how she had learned to speak in such a manner. Her rapid growth unsettled him, yet he gently reassured her by patting her head. Brian pressed further, questioning whether it was safe to return to Velia's. Cyan reassured him, stating that he intended to issue a formal complaint. He noticed a detail in the letter, realizing that the dean had signed it directly rather than the administrative office. This indicated that the dean sought a personal meeting. Memories of his previous life surfaced, recalling an encounter where the headmaster had discouraged him from joining the Knights of Light. Back then, Cyan had been naive and had nodded, believing it to be the correct choice for his brother's sake. The headmaster had warned him that nothing good would come of living as another's puppet. Cyan had remembered the words with bitterness. Returning to the present, Brian suggested naming the dragon. Cyan responded without hesitation, selecting the name Nana. Brian frowned at the casual choice, fearing it had been made without thought. Nana, however, celebrated joyfully, repeating the name and announcing that she wished to be Nana Vert, like her father. Cyan grew still, disturbed that the child knew his full name despite never being told. Brian sighed heavily, already predicting that Nana's unusual growth and behavior would invite future trouble. The focus shifted to the Royal Academy, where the dean, Kundal Kusal, sat within his office. He considered Cyan with both curiosity and caution. The boy had absorbed a 4-star spell using a 1-star sphere, a feat beyond ordinary comprehension. Kundal wished to see the true limits of this student. Kundal was no ordinary headmaster. He had once taught Emperor Dion Sevalus and had been the father of the late Empress Diana Kusal. His mastery as a 9-star mage was unquestioned, though grief had confined his later years to the academy. Despite his past pacifism, his sudden involvement in the succession struggle now weighed on Cyan's mind. As Cyan approached the office, he sensed a disturbance. A boundary spread across the hallway, crafted with pure and stable mana. Cyan smirked, recognizing that Kundal was testing him. Rather than force his way through the 9-star barrier, Cyan bypassed it entirely. He leapt through the window, landing directly behind Kundal's desk. The headmaster was stunned at the sudden appearance. He had expected a prolonged struggle, not such an unorthodox entrance. Cyan declared his purpose, stating that he disagreed with the warning letter. He argued that the letter had not been a genuine punishment but rather a test. Kundal admitted that this was true. However, he refused to withdraw the warning, offering instead the challenge of persuasion. Cyan asked a bold question regarding Kundal's intentions for the Empire. He inquired whether the dean sought expansion of the realm or honor for his own family. Kundal raised his eyebrows at the audacity. He answered that neither ambition concerned him. Cyan pressed further, questioning whether Kundal would remain neutral if the succession were contested by the 3rd or 4th princes against the 1st prince. Kundal's expression hardened, his magical pressure filling the chamber. He accused Cyan of arrogance. Cyan remained composed, recalling how in his previous life Kundal had supported Louis-Nel Sevalus, who later betrayed him. Louis-Nel had seized the throne by killing his siblings and had framed Kundal as a traitor, leading to his death. Cyan judged Kundal as a man who once fought for another's future only to be discarded. The dean slammed his desk, declaring that Cyan underestimated the stability of the century-long peace. He claimed Cyan was nothing more than a fool despite his talent. Cyan countered with his knowledge of imperial politics, pointing out that the Nephilis household, tied to the Empress, craved power and would destabilize the empire to secure it. He warned that when the empire's peace fell, the academy itself would collapse. Kundal recoiled in shock at the clarity and depth of an 11-year-old's insight. He demanded to know why Cyan revealed such knowledge. Cyan replied that he wished to make a deal. He offered to aid both the academy and the Kusal family in exchange for the withdrawal of the warning letter. Before Kundal could respond, radiant light filled the room as a massive magic circle formed across the ceiling. Chains erupted from it, binding Cyan's limbs with overwhelming force. The pressure pressed him to his knees. Kundal had invoked the chains of judgment, intending to crush Cyan beneath the weight of his magic. Cyan did not panic when the chains of judgment closed in. A faint smile touched his lips, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He viewed the dean's overwhelming spell as nothing more than another wall to break. Kundal stroked his beard with leisure and looked down with disdain, declaring through his attitude that Cyan had been overestimated. Rather than argue, Cyan lifted his head calmly and prepared to prove himself. The void sphere technique spread across his body, dark mist coiling like a night sky without light. The smoke seeped into the cracks of the golden chains, slowly devouring them from within. The black sphere pulsed and expanded, its weight bending the chains until cracks echoed across the chamber. Kundal instinctively stepped back, shielding his face from the pressure. He understood the absurdity of what he was witnessing. A spell classified at 1 star was swallowing the strength of a 9-star restraint. Sweat rolled down his forehead as fear filled his gaze. The golden chains trembled violently, then shattered one after another. At the peak of the void sphere's expansion, the last binding snapped and clattered to the floor. The sphere then dissolved silently into the air, leaving Cyan standing unscathed. He brushed his uniform as if dusting off dirt, his composure unwavering. The headmaster lowered his head in reluctant acknowledgement. He accepted Cyan's demand and withdrew the warning, though he questioned if that was truly all the boy desired. Cyan answered with steady eyes that he wished only for peace within the academy. Kundal frowned, uncertain of his sincerity. yet Cyan's determination revealed nothing else. Inwardly, Cyan remembered the Academy's destruction from his previous life and resolved not to witness it again. Later that afternoon, the sun baked the streets with heavy light. Brian carried a bundle of sweets and toys on his return to the dormitory, humming happily to himself. He thought of Nana's delight when seeing the pile of treats and laughed like a carefree caretaker. Halfway through the road, unease struck him. The lively street had turned unnaturally silent. Though the hour should have been busy, he found no one nearby. His steps slowed, eyes narrowing as he sensed danger. A chill crept in when he turned a corner. Shadows pooled thickly in the narrow alley, pressing against him with suffocating weight. Brian whispered for the hidden presence to reveal itself. A figure emerged from the darkness, leaving him frozen with wide eyes. His bag slipped from his grip, scattering sweets across the ground. Before he could move, the shadows swallowed him whole, leaving nothing but fallen candy upon the stone road. Elsewhere, Cyan reflected briefly on his agreement with Kundal while seated in class. The lesson dragged with unbearable monotony. He leaned on his desk, nearly drooling from boredom. Eventually, he slipped out of the classroom, muttering to himself that revisiting knowledge from 30 years prior was nothing less than torture. He decided to train at the Mist Guild headquarters instead. His plan collapsed when Erin appeared behind him, her sharp voice demanding his destination. Cyan turned, startled, and faced the silver-haired princess. She pressed him relentlessly, refusing to accept his excuse of visiting the restroom. Risamus attempted to calm her stern questioning, yet Erin ignored the advice. She demanded to know why Cyan still addressed her with formality despite their closeness. Cyan answered stiffly that he was a civilian while she remained a princess. Before the tension resolved, two figures descended the staircase. Fabian and Nerobian, the third and fourth princes, approached leisurely. Their eyes gleamed with mockery as they addressed Erin with contempt. Fabian criticized her association with commoners, while Nerobian added with a smirk that she had sunk to mingling with servants. Erin bowed her head, enduring the scorn. Cyan recognized them as princes of the Nepalese family, rivals to Erin. Fabian then noticed Cyan and his tone changed instantly. He praised Cyan's duel and offered friendship, while Nerobian patted Cyan's shoulder with arrogant familiarity. They ignored Erin entirely, viewing only Cyan as worthy of their attention. Cyan responded curtly, his disinterest plain, yet their faces lit with satisfaction at his acknowledgement. They departed after Fabian whispered venomously into Erin's ear, reminding her of her lowly place. Erin trembled with clenched fists, humiliated by her brothers. Cyan observed quietly, then told her that blood ties meant nothing when power ruled. He warned her that such treatment revealed only that her brothers feared her existence. Erin stared at him in shock, her emotions torn between sadness and strange warmth. Her face flushed crimson as she tried to steady herself, while Risamus looked on in confusion at her sudden daze. Afterward, Cyan returned to the dormitory. He called out for Brian, but only Nana stirred faintly in her sleep. When he called out again, Kiram appeared in the form of a flickering flame. Cyan questioned her shape, to which the demon's sword lazily replied that it was useful for concealment. Cyan ordered him to search for Brian, provoking Kiram's irritation. He snapped that he was not a dog to be sent on errands. Before the argument could escalate, Kiram sniffed the air and stiffened. He declared that he smelled blood. Cyan's expression hardened with unease. At that moment, Brian was pressed against an alley wall, surrounded by thugs. Their leader, Barrett, sneered at him with cruel satisfaction. Barrett, the arrogant noble who had once bullied Risamus, now sought vengeance for the humiliation Cyan had caused him. He raised his voice with venom, commanding his men to kill Brian. Just as a mercenary raised his sword, Cyan appeared on the roof of a nearby house. His presence froze the air around the alley. The sight of him made Barrett tremble, cold sweat pouring down his back as dread consumed him. Cyan's fist clenched tightly while a faint dark mist coiled beneath his feet. His sharp gaze locked onto Barrett, who stiffened under the weight of his aura. Brian lay on the ground, his bruised face lifting weakly when he recognized Cyan. He could barely whisper a greeting, his voice strained and broken. Cyan's eyes narrowed at the sight of his battered subordinate. His expression turned colder, as if he had already passed judgment. Barrett, though startled by Cyan's sudden arrival, still clung to his confidence. He believed his hired mercenaries would overwhelm Cyan, so he sneered from below, masking his fear with arrogance. Cyan tightened his grip on the demon's sword Kiram, its crimson glow pulsing like living blood. Without hesitation, he descended into the mist. His eighth form strike erupted, the blade moving faster than the mercenaries' eyes could follow. One by one, they collapsed in silence, cut down before they could even react. In the span of breaths, the alley was littered with their fallen bodies, while only the gleam of Cyan's glowing sword remained visible in the haze. Barrett stumbled backward, his eyes wide with horror. His confidence crumbled as memories of the past resurfaced. He recalled the terrifying sight of Cyan's gigantic mana sphere, the day that had left him shaken to his core. His mind screamed that he could not win, yet in desperation, he tried to muster mana, shouting his intent to kill. Cyan gave him no time. A swift kick struck Barrett's stomach, launching him across the alley. He tumbled painfully, his body rolling until he crashed into a wall. Groaning, he writhed in agony, unable to rise. Cyan approached with calm steps, his eyes cold and unwavering. Barrett sneered faintly despite his condition, mocking Cyan for meddling in his so-called pleasures. Cyan's disgust deepened. He knew Barrett's reputation extended beyond petty cruelty. In his past life, Barrett had burned animals alive for sport, tormented servants, and ultimately murdered a classmate. The day Cyan had infiltrated the Louisville mansion after Barrett's expulsion remained vivid in his memory. The corpses of countless servants had filled the basement, their deaths nothing but entertainment for Barrett. The memory stirred Cyan's rage. He remembered how Barrett had once laughed in the face of death, claiming satisfaction in his twisted life. That cruel smile was burned into Cyan's mind, a symbol of inhuman depravity. Death had been too merciful for someone like him. The thought reignited Cyan's fury. Simply killing Barrett again would never balance the weight of his sins. Cyan seized Barrett's mouth with one hand, forcing it open. A small monosphere formed in his other palm, its glow crackling with ominous energy. Barrett's eyes widened with terror as he realized Cyan's intent. The sphere would drain him completely, leaving him powerless. He tried to resist, yet Cyan's grip allowed no escape. His muffled screams filled the alley as the sphere edged closer. Cyan forced the mana sphere into Barrett's throat, pressing until he swallowed. Barrett convulsed violently, his body burning as the sphere devoured his mana. Cyan's voice cut through the chaos, condemning him for daring to harm Brian. His words fell like a sentence of truth, cold and merciless. Barrett writhed in unbearable pain, his pride stripped away, leaving only a broken shell consumed by suffering. Above, a cloaked figure watched silently. Kellen, subordinate of Ekel, had been trailing Cyan for days. Panic swept through him as he realized the depth of Cyan's strength. He resolved to report back quickly, but before he could retreat, a hand seized him from behind. Sirika, clad in the Mist Guild's cloak, pressed a dagger to his throat and silenced him with a glare. She revealed her awareness of his stalking, dismissing him as nothing more than an obsessive shadow. Cyan turned away from Barrett and moved toward Brian. His subordinate struggled to sit upright, clutching his bruises with lowered eyes. He apologized for his failure, his voice weak and ashamed. Cyan looked down at him with sharp disdain, questioning why he had engaged in a fight he could never win. Brian lowered his head further, unable to answer. Cyan reminded him that reckless loyalty was useless, for he needed subordinates who survived, not martyrs. Sirika then stepped forward with the guild members at her back. Cyan greeted her calmly, already aware of their presence. She tossed Kellen to the ground, presenting him as a captured spy. Cyan showed no surprise, remarking that he had known all along. Sirika admitted his perception impressed her, her thoughts silently acknowledging his talents. She had seen his intellect, his ability to handle Kiram, and his mental strength. He was a rare successor candidate. However, she warned him to remain cautious, for more eyes would soon turn toward him. Cyan agreed to be careful, yet his resolve burned unwavering. He declared through his presence alone that he would crush anyone who dared harm his people. Sirika bowed lightly, a smile curving on her lips as she recognized his determination. Before departing, she pointed to Kellen and advised Cyan not to overlook him. Cyan studied the trembling man with a calculating stare. He remembered Kellen's jealousy in his past life and realized his value as a pawn. Dark mist coiled around Cyan's hand, flowing into Kellen's body. The subordinate screamed as the black smoke invaded his mouth and eyes, engulfing him entirely while Cyan's gaze gleamed with ruthless intent. The sound of wooden swords echoed across the academy grounds that morning. Risamis gripped her weapon firmly and charged forward, striking directly at Princess Erin. The princess barely managed to parry, though the force of the blow still made her stagger and cry out. She attempted to push Risamis back with defiance, yet her opponent had already slipped behind her. Before the princess could react, the wooden blade touched her back, sealing Risamis's victory. Erin gasped at her own mistake, pouted with dissatisfaction, and reluctantly accepted defeat. Risamis shifted awkwardly, apologizing for addressing her incorrectly. The princess corrected her sharply, insisting on the proper form of address. Risamis quickly complied, flustered by the sternness in Erin's tone. From the adjacent ground, young Master Erin remarked on the intensity of their training. Nearby, Cyan pressed Brian through a merciless session. Brian absorbed blow after blow, unable to keep up with Cyan's overwhelming speed. A punch landed on his stomach, followed by a swift kick to his knee. He could only clutch himself in pain, trying desperately to endure. Cyan stepped back briefly, recognizing that Brian's endurance exceeded his expectations. Despite the punishment, Brian remained standing. Cyan studied him carefully, realizing his subordinate's resilience would prove useful in the future. Even blood dripping from Brian's mouth did not stop him from declaring his readiness to continue. Cyan acknowledged the toughness of his body, concluding that he must become strong enough to withstand future threats. Memories of Barrett's cruelty resurfaced in Cyan's mind, and his resolve hardened. Brian, still recovering, asked about Kellen. Cyan assured him that Kellen was already under control. At that moment, Kellen was dragged forward and thrown to the ground, writhing in agony as Cyan's spell consumed him. Brian, despite his exhaustion, watched with awe as Cyan displayed mastery of 9-star dark element magic. The spell took hold, and Kellen's demeanor changed. He knelt obediently before Cyan, his defiance erased. Under the spell's influence, he introduced himself as Kellen Diego, Guardian Knight of Valus, formerly serving Ekal. Now his loyalty belonged to Cyan. With burning intensity in his altered eyes, Kellen pledged himself fully. Cyan observed the unnatural loyalty with unease, though he accepted it as necessary. Brian called to Cyan, sensing his hesitation. Cyan dismissed his doubts, choosing instead to focus on the path ahead. Soon after, Princess Erin and Resimus arrived. They found Cyan training with Brian and expressed surprise at the sight. Brian bowed respectfully while Cyan acknowledged their presence with indifference. Erin explained that she trained every weekend with Resimus, especially after the recent incident. Her words reminded Cyan of Barrett's fate. Barrett had been discovered outside the nurse's office, beaten beyond recognition and stripped of his ability to wield magic. The truth of what had been forced upon him remained hidden. Cyan recalled making Barrett swallow a mana stone, a punishment inspired by a cruel trick from his past life. Resimus reacted with silence whenever Barrett's downfall was mentioned. Her lack of satisfaction surprised Cyan, who had expected her to feel relieved. She bowed her head instead, unwilling to speak. Suddenly, Nana appeared above them, floating in the air. Brian panicked while Cyan was startled to see her free from Kiram's watch. The girl fell directly into Princess Erin's arms, immediately calling out to Cyan as her father. The princess froze in disbelief, questioning how such a situation had arisen. Cyan sighed heavily, forced to explain. He recounted how he had found the child, clarifying that she was a dragon king. He concealed the fact that it had happened during an assassination mission. The princess listened carefully and eventually relaxed, relieved to learn the girl was not his biological child. Resimus played with Nana while Erin teased Cyan for showing unexpected kindness. Cyan, however, felt no joy from her words, fearing she might use the situation against him. Brian also worried about the danger of discovery, knowing Nana's true nature could cause expulsion from the academy. Erin reassured them, promising she would not reveal the secret. Resimus echoed her support with innocence, declaring she had no one to tell. Cyan questioned Erin's reason, and she explained it was out of pity for Nana's situation. The girl would not be accepted among dragons or humans. Erin praised Cyan for his willingness to care for her and asked if she could visit occasionally. Embarrassed, she insisted her interest was only in Nana. Cyan accepted without objection, and the princess quietly blushed at his affirmation, mistaking his words as a sign of intimacy. After leaving, Cyan returned to his dormitory, where Kiram mocked him for the earlier events. The sword showed no remorse for failing to watch Nana, instead making light of her behavior. Brian suggested they take her on walks, and Cyan agreed. Far away in the mountain range, two dragons flew together. One of them, Lukian, suddenly halted. He sensed something foul emanating from the direction of Ruin. His companion confirmed their location, and Lukian's expression darkened. He felt an aura at Ruin Academy that no dragon could allow to remain unchecked. His eyes gleamed with menace as he declared the journey must be delayed. That night Cyan decided to let Nana play outside. He and Brian led her to an empty lot on the outskirts of Ruin. Having been confined in the dormitory for too long, the girl was delighted to fly freely in the night air. Her small wings flapped with excitement as she darted ahead, causing Brian to chase after her anxiously. He worried about the danger of the open land, while Cyan remained calm, simply observing the joy shining on her face. Cyan considered the distance from the center of Ruin and judged the area safe enough for her to roam. Kiram mocked him with sharp words, calling him a father and suggesting he should find a mother for the child. The blade mentioned Princess Erin with amusement. Cyan gritted his teeth, prepared to retort, when a chilling sensation suddenly spread through the ground. Kiram sensed the disturbance as well and muttered darkly that something was approaching. At once two figures appeared before them, revealing themselves as dragons in human form. The force of their presence shattered the silence of the night. Brian immediately recognized the danger and hurried to seize Nana in his arms, shielding her as debris scattered across the lot. Cyan stepped forward, scanning them with sharp eyes. He identified the dragons instantly. One was the silver dragon Lucian, his narrowed eyes filled with disgust. The other was the red dragon Catalina, who glared with contempt. Both radiated malice. Brian tightened his grip on Nana, trying to shield her trembling body from their gaze. Catalina sneered at the child, scorning the existence of a half-dragon, half-human. Her contempt extended to Cyan as she mocked him for wielding Kiram. The blade reacted furiously, shouting in anger at being demeaned. Catalina dismissed him as nothing more than a degraded tool. Her arrogant words fueled Kiram's rage, yet before he could retort further, Lucian silenced her with a raised hand. Lucan's gaze shifted to Nana. He commanded them to hand the girl over, declaring her an abomination worth experimenting on. Nana clung to Brian in fear, her small body trembling. Brian turned his back fully to the dragons, protecting her even as fear lingered in his own eyes. Tears fell from Nana's face as she buried herself deeper in his embrace. Cyan stepped in front of them, his eyes burning with fury. He ordered Brian to stay behind him. Lucian repeated his demand with disdain, promising to let them go in exchange for the child. Cyan responded with calm defiance, calling him nothing more than a glorified lizard. The insult angered Lucian, who lashed his sword at the ground in intimidation. Sparks exploded around Cyan, though he remained unmoved. Brian flinched at the display of power, clutching Nana tighter. Cyan commanded him to retreat with the child. Brian obeyed reluctantly, carrying her to safety. Lucian sneered at Cyan, mocking his insignificance. Lightning surged around his blade as he prepared to strike. Cyan invoked the thick mist technique, merging his body with Kiram. His skin darkened, his hair blazed crimson, and a demonic aura surged forth. The dragons recognized his transformation immediately. Catalina gasped at the power, while Lucian identified it as the force of the exile. He dismissed it nonetheless, calling Cyan an inferior human. Cyan vanished from sight in an instant, reappearing beside him with lethal intent. Lucian raised his sword defensively, caught off guard by the sudden assault. The clash of their weapons rang out in the night sky. Furious, Lucian unleashed a shockwave technique. A massive formation appeared above Cyan, releasing a pillar of lightning that tore the ground apart. Cyan used Mist Glide to evade, reappearing behind Lucian with his sword drawn. He unleashed the rushing mist storm, forcing Lucian into a desperate defense. Catalina rushed upward, summoning a fire barrier to protect him. Her arrogance made her believe the barrier unbreakable, forged with centuries of accumulated mana. She declared that no human could shatter it. Cyan launched Mist Sword, 8 fluttering petals. His consecutive strikes tore the barrier apart in a blinding explosion. Horror filled Catalina's eyes as she realized the truth too late. Cyan's blade cut through her in a flurry of slashes, dismembering her body until she disintegrated into dust. Her scream echoed faintly before silence claimed her. Lucan's fury erupted as he watched his close subordinate perish. He demanded to know what Cyan truly was. His words were met only with silence. Then he invoked a transformation spell, abandoning his human form. His body grew, wings expanded, and his jaw lengthened into the terrifying shape of a white dragon. The beast roared, shaking the heavens. Cyan leapt towards its head without hesitation. Lucian realized his intention and panicked, knowing the vulnerability of his horn. Cyan drove Kiram into the horn with precision. The dragon howled in agony as the mist expanded into countless blades, tearing across his body. Lucian collapsed under the relentless storm of blades, his form disintegrating into fragments that vanished into the dust. Brian rushed back with Nana in his arms, calling out to his master in shock. He froze at the sight before him. Cyan stood calmly over the corpse, carving flesh from the dragon's body. With chilling composure, he consumed a piece of the meat, holding another portion toward Brian. He told him to eat, explaining that it was precious beyond measure.